Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Hoopsville Studios. I'm your host, Dave McHugh. I am back in Baltimore, as they say around here. Welcome back to the show. Let me get it done first and foremost. A big thank you to Mr. Pat Coleman for hosting the show on Sunday while I was out of town for work. Also, thank you to him for stepping in for me on the NCAA shows on Monday. Really appreciate him taking that time out of his busy schedule. He does enough with football. He certainly does a lot behind the scenes. He has stepped in to help us and appear on this show on a number of occasions. But seriously, big heartfelt thank you to him for stepping up so we could still have a selection show. We could have gotten away with trying to do one in a hotel room, but I'll be honest with you, that's a lot of gear I am taking with me when I'm supposed to be focused on work. That's the first thing. Second, setting it all up is a pain in the rear end, as you can probably imagine. That's not exactly what I was looking to do. And third of all, it was just going to be a lot. It was just going to be a lot. And so, Pat, thank you. Really appreciate it. And it was great shows, great interviews. I know I have not been able to listen to all of them. I was hoping to listen to them as I came home on the flight, but I was neck deep in paying attention to the brackets coming out at that time, while also dealing with sending out some emails and preparing for today's show and all that. So thanks to Pat for filling in. I will listen to more of those interviews. I listened to probably 2/3 of the show before I got pulled away to do some other things. But good stuff on Mr. Coleman's side. I know he had some tech issue with audio at one point, and my heart goes out to him. Unfortunately, it was when I wasn't paying attention. I've made that error before, both in recording and in live, and it's absolutely the worst feeling to find out afterwards. So again, hats off, though, to Pat. Really appreciate him stepping in. I think we figured out that's the fourth time he has filled in for Hoopsville. First time since 2012. A little side note, that was when, I can't believe, no, it wasn't. Well, no, he filled in 2012. I'm sorry. There's another thing I'm thinking of, and I'm conflating the two, so we won't go down that rabbit hole to bore you. Congratulations to the 128 programs that are still dancing in the NCAA tournament. It's outstanding. It's terrific. Some incredible basketball in the closing week, and especially the closing weekend. Some major upsets. Some bid busting, even with NPI. There can be bid busting, and we certainly got it on the on both sides, really. Especially, I would say even on the women's side. And we'll talk to at least one, if not two, of those bid busters here today on the show. We're going to talk to a few people. Let's go through the list quickly because it's jam-packed today. We got a lot to get to. So we'll go in order with how they're going to appear on the show. First and foremost, we'll talk to the National Committee chairs about the brackets, the decisions they made in terms of matchups and hosts and placement of things and what they're trying to get at. Bethany Danley will join us from the Women's Committee first and foremost. She's the OAC Commissioner. She'll join us here in a very short bit. We'll talk to her about all the decisions that they had to make in this tournament. A reminder that the women have priority the first weekend, not the second, so that will come into play in some of our conversations. On the men's side, John Alisi will join us from Baruch. Unfortunately, his team lost in the conference title game on Friday. Pat talked to him about that on Sunday, so we're not going to go rehash that or the interesting complications of John Jay winning that conference, who Pat talked to, Ryan Highland as well, about that. We won't dive back into those rabbit holes. I seem to say rabbit holes a lot these days. But we will talk about John about some of the matchups, some of the decisions on what they wanted to do, etc. Because I'll be honest, on the men's side, there's some questions on what some of the decisions were. So we'll talk to John Alisi coming up. Then we'll switch and start talking to some programs that are dancing for the first time in a very long time. Ramiro Dominguez will join us from I'm going to say this wrong. I'm going to have to double check it. Principia. I've been saying it wrong before. I used to say Principia. I believe it's Principia. We will talk to him about the program's first SLIAC championship and getting into the NCAA tournament for a program that just 3 years ago had one win and 4 years ago had to shut the program down. They've had some pretty good success since then, and this is certainly a feather in their cap. We'll talk to him coming up. Then we'll switch gears to men. We'll talk to Colin Tabb from Western New England. They are into the tournament for the first time since 2001, along with their women's program, we should point out. So we'll talk about the men at the Golden Bears men's team in the tournament. Then we'll head down to the ODAC. Roanoke's in the tournament for the first time since 2001. Paige Moyer was head coach back then. Clay Nunley is head coach now. He has been for a while. They lost in the ODAC title game, but Clay Nunley, along with junior guard Marcus Morgan, will join us from the 20th ranked Maroons. We'll also talk to Marianne Dietz, the Mount St. Mary women's basketball coach. Coincidentally or ironically enough, you could make maybe an argument for both. Mount St. Mary, last time they were on this show was 2019. Michael Capolino was the head coach at the time on this exact show, the Brackets Breakdown show, talking about making the NCAA tournament. So appropriately enough, we'll have Marianne Dietz on the show to talk about that. And somewhere in there, I think after we talk to John Alisi, but it's a little bit of a floater, we're going to hear from Ryan Scott, who has been diving into a bit of an issue with mileage and the official NCAA mileage calculator. We will hear from him on his research, investigation, deep dive, whatever you want to call it. We'll talk to him about that to see what issues we may have been dealing with already, could be dealing with this year, that could have been impacting the committee in some maybe minor way, but we've seen major implications of this in the past, and we're not getting answers on it. So we're going to bring it to light. Ryan's got a little segment for us on that we'll take a deeper dive into. Well, we'll at least get his perspective on it here today. So that's all ahead. You can interact with us on the show on a lot of our social medias, Twitter or X, at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. You can also find us on Instagram and Threads that way as well, though I just realized I don't think we posted on Instagram in the last few days. I apologize for that. You can also find us on Facebook, where we're live streaming this broadcast. Just look for Hoopsville there. Same with Blue Sky. And, of course, we're streaming on Hudl, our partners there, along with Apple TV, Amazon Fire, Roku, and Android TV. And we're live simulcasting on our YouTube page as well. I want to thank all of you who are joining us there so far today. And, of course, if you're not watching this live, you're probably listening to it. Well, you may be listening to us on the podcast. You might be watching the video live or on demand as well. But if you're on our podcast, thanks so much for joining us. If you have a podcast avenue that you normally use and you have to find Hoopsville in another way and you want us on that other avenue, let us know. We're trying to be on every avenue possible. We're certainly on the biggest group of them, whether it be TuneIn, Spotify, Amazon, Apple. I think we're on Amazon. I got to double check that. iHeart and all the rest. But if there's one out there that we're not on, please let us know. So 128 teams dancing. A reminder that the NCAA tournaments, game times, and all that information is on d3hoops.com. Friday and Saturday, game times are split up in a way. Women, a little bit more narrow. Men, a lot bit wider, especially because men have to have a game for yeshiva to be done in time for for them to be back at their place before sunset. And then if they were to advance, the second game would be late enough after sunset to give them a chance to play. We'll talk a little bit to John about that as well. So it's a little bit more spread out on the men's side, but the men have been spreading it out for a long time, and it's great for all of us to watch as many games as possible. I will be at Gettysburg on the women's side. Normally I am their broadcaster. It looks like this time I will be the producer and director because we want a good show out there at Gettysburg, but I'll be able to see the Gettysburg pod on the women's side, certainly, and look forward to that. You're hearing the door because Tucker has decided he doesn't want to be in here today for the show. So during the commercial break, we'll open that door a bit for him to come and go. I'm a little disappointed. He sat here under this desk right over here on my left, if you're watching on the show, the entire show last Thursday. I think it was last Thursday. The entire show lay here comfortable as anything. But apparently today, he's not so pleased. So we'll be moving Tucker out here in just a few minutes. So if you have questions for us, you can also email us, hoopsville@d3sports.com. That's hoopsville d3sports.com. We will do our best to answer your questions. I have the email system up and running in front of me on a monitor, so I'll do my best to catch any questions that you may have. And you may have questions about bracketing. A reminder, we're dealing with 500 miles. We're dealing with some flight restrictions because we can't blow the budget, though there's some allowances for a little bit more than in the past. I think some people are frustrated that Whitman women didn't get a chance to host. We'll talk to Bethany Danley about that. I got wind, and not through official channels, but I got wind that women had to adjust their bracket because they couldn't get a host that they wanted because it was going to require more flights. We'll check if that's accurate with Bethany. My theory is they were trying to host at Whitman, and they couldn't get enough flights allotted and allowed to do that. So the question was, do we scuttle everything else what we're doing, or do we send Whitman somewhere else? And I had said on this show several weeks ago even, I may have even said it on the Top 16s broadcast, that Whitman was in that position of, yes, being in the top 8, but likely to be a team that the committee could send somewhere, treat as a top seed, but save some flights for later use or needed elsewhere by sending Whitman. And it worked out that way because you didn't have a lot of teams that just were isolated. We'll talk to Bethany more about that. But I understand the frustration with that. My frustration with that is that was a known entity for weeks. And if you are a good enough program, you'll win anywhere. Does it suck for the fans who can't have the games at their place? Sure, but so does it stink for the 3 teams who have to come to your place. And that's where I think some of the selfishness sometimes doesn't get truly appreciated. There are teams that say, well, we earned to be host here. Yes, but somebody also earned to be host who can't be host. Not everyone can be host. It's unfortunate for Whitman. I understand that. But I think this makes the bracket better. So there you go. There's my spiel. All right, so we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll have Bethany Danley on the show. We'll talk about some of that. We'll talk about other decisions that they had to make along the way and plenty more. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the Hoopsville studios. Thanks to Pat for bringing everything to us from the Minneapolis-based studios. We're back in the Baltimore area here on Hoopsville. Thanks for joining us.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
I used to never really talk, ever. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. It helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
Football has taught me a lot throughout my life. It's definitely had a huge imprint on who I am as a person. Competing at a Division III level created that opportunity for me to go to college. Not only was I the first one in my family to graduate college, but I was really the first one to even go. Being the first one, I'm breaking that cycle, and now that I've graduated, I'm not sure what's the next step, but I know I have a lot of doors open. And a lot of those are open because I played football and ran track here at Otterbein.
The National Association of Basketball Coaches is the nation's premier professional development and advocacy organization for basketball coaches at every level. The NABC strives to serve as the voice for coaches on national issues while advancing the core value of leadership, service, advocacy, education, and inclusion. To learn more about the NABC and to become a member, visit NABC.com and follow the NABC on social media at NABC 1927. That's NABC.com or NABC 1927 on social media.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
In any way that we can.
To get a friend home safe.
To never blame the victim.
It's on us.
To stand up.
To make our community safe for all. It's on us.
It's on us to look out for each other at parties.
It's on us.
To be more than just a bystander.
To step up and say something.
It's on us. All of us.
To stop sexual assault. Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
If I lose, I'll respond with respect.
If I win, I'll back it up with humility.
If I fail, I'll rise up with honor. It's tough for us to put it all on the line.
Don't undo my hard work with poor sportsmanship.
Respect. It's the name of the game.
Coach of the Year, Administrator of the Year, All-America Team, Wade Trophy. The WBCA doesn't just honor coaches, but players, administrators, and much more. The WBCA strives to honor those who have contributed to the advancement of women's basketball. Celebrate the present, honor the past, look to the future.
For the love of the game. But for those of us who are Division III student athletes, it's more than that, a lot more.
Sure, the game is important, but as we work so hard to build both mind and body, it's more about team.
That is why NCAA Division III teamed up with Special Olympics, and in giving the gift of sport to those for whom it seemed an impossible dream, we are working to make this a better world.
Help us keep that dream alive.
You can make a difference.
We are the coaches.
Welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody, as we continue to roll along live on this special brackets edition on a Tuesday morning. I mean, we're coming in. Well, we're still Tuesday morning on the East Coast. And for the most of you, most of the show will be in the morning, so I'll get away with saying morning. Not usual to be doing one this early, let alone on a Tuesday. So thanks for joining us. A little bit of an adaptation again, me traveling back. And it's a good thing we didn't try and do Monday night because I did get delayed. Not badly, but there were issues at BWI Airport that delayed my flight slightly, not as bad as some. Only slightly, but then when I got to BWI, they were still dealing with the ramifications of that, and as always, took forever to get out of there. I didn't get home till well after 7 o'clock, and if we were trying to get a show on the air last night, I would have tried to absolutely hurt somebody, and that wasn't worth it. All right, let's pivot and talk about the brackets on the women's side. We start with, and for the most part, pretty amazing bracket, considering some of the challenges that they had. But we had heard from Bethany Danley throughout this process in the last month, and we got a pretty good sense on what they were going to try and accomplish along the way. To talk about it and to recap it all, and maybe to finally no longer deal with me, Bethany Danley joins us on the Hoopsville Hotline to discuss it all. Coach, I'm so used to saying, Commish of the OAC, thanks for joining us once again. The time you've given us has really been appreciative, and I appreciate you finding some time here on a Tuesday.
Thanks for having me on, Dave. Appreciate it.
Hey, first and foremost, have you gotten some rest?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Then that's where we are. That's all we need. How did it go overall? I know you talked up with Pat on Sunday just as you were starting to dive in and kind of see what you had. And in all fairness, I got the sense that you all had done a really good job of kind of starting to read the tea leaves and see things ahead of yourselves. But how did the process actually turn out? How did it go from the time you really started buckling in with all the teams that you knew you had through the end?
I think our group felt good about the process. It is a different mindset, which we've talked about before, because you do have hard, fast rankings. And while that is not going to control every decision, you are cognizant of the transparency of people looking at how people are ranked in the NPI and where they land in the bracket. With that said, I think it's important to acknowledge that seed lines aren't perfect, And we've said from the get-go, they're not going to be perfect. We've got a variety of factors that we have to consider when creating the bracket. So that prohibits a very hard and fast, the 1 plays a 64, the 2 plays a 63. It just doesn't work out that way. And given geographic constraints, given trying to avoid conference matchups, we have a couple of conferences who have a lot of teams who got in the tournament. We think that we landed in a pretty good spot of trying to balance all of those different factors, have a creative bracket, and hopefully some really competitive games ahead of us.
Yeah, you obviously you had the WIAC, the NESCAC, and some others who certainly had a lot of teams in there, and it certainly adds to the challenge. I think you got a little bit lucky, too, that you had a lot of teams kind of in their regions or within the 500 miles to be able to move teams around. It certainly worked out pretty nicely. And, yes, we had discussed from day one, it would be lovely, right, to have 1v64, 2v63, et cetera, and 1v16 ultimately, and you couldn't. But ultimately, Ryan did a nice job of breaking it down, and I was looking at it, and you got like a 3-8, 9-12 in a bracket. You got a 5-11, 2-13 where you need some travel in a bracket. A 3-15, 6-11. You got some nice variety there, certainly. Now, you had the opportunity where you had hosting priority in the opening weekend, but it seemed to me, and I'll credit the other guys too, to the rest of the group, you looked like you were prognosticating a bit down the road, knowing, hey, if A and B happen, this pod's going to probably have to be like this. So while we'd love to have the matchup over here, it's smarter to put the matchup in this other spot instead. Is that a fair assessment?
In terms of the sectional weekend, I think we've communicated this from the get-go. To your point, you have to project who could win. You've got to account for a lot of different scenarios with the goal of trying to facilitate opportunities for the top seed to host should they advance. I think we did that pretty well. There are probably a couple of situations that could play out that might create some interesting scenarios. In some other pods, I think it's been scripted pretty well, and we've accounted for a lot of those factors. One thing that's important to note is the Champs Committee directive. One thing that was very specific was that the 1 seeds, your 1 through 4 MPI ranked team, and your 2 seeds, your 5 through 8s, should not meet until the sectional final. That actually allowed us to have situations where we knew we would have some flights. And so that helped facilitate some of these scenarios should the top seed advance, them being afforded the opportunity to host in sectionals, particularly Bowdoin, a geographic outlier. That's something that helped us a little bit in terms of trying to build the bracket in a way where if top seeds advance, they have opportunities to host.
So in other words, to maybe read between the lines or to say it in a different way, you were able to use that as an argument for why you were going to need flights in the second weekend, though that might have handcuffed you in the opening weekend.
It was a reason for needing flights in the second weekend, and this is very black and white, so I don't mind saying this. Gustavus can't get to any of the top 4 seeds with the drive. Whitman can't get to any of the top 4 seeds with the drive.
Right.
And with the directive that's been specified, a 1 is bracketed to meet a 2 in the sectional final. That was very clear from the Champs Committee when they talked about these new bracketing parameters. So that right there bought us 2 flights in the second weekend, because there's no way to bracket anything where Gustavus is going to a 1 or Whitman's going to a 1 without flights.
Forgive me, I'm looking around because I believe Tucker just re-entered the studio. And it caught me by surprise. I thought he was done with the studio today. Yeah, no, certainly it felt that way. I was trying to prolong Whitman, but we brought Whitman up. Let's talk about it. Top 8 seed, not at home, opening weekend. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I was one of those who said, listen, this is a scenario where they aren't guaranteed to host. And I think maybe that was my softball to you a week or so ago where I said, doesn't mean you get the hosting opportunity. But I got the sense Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, just through the grapevine, nothing official, no one really close, that maybe you all were trying to get Whitman an opportunity to host and got handcuffed by having too many flights. Is that a fair way of saying it, that you made that effort and it didn't work out, or was it a little bit more simple or complicated than that?
The committee had multiple brackets that were created, that there was variations in all of them in a lot of different capacities. The bracket that was approved was one that had 3 flights in the first weekend.
The look on your face tells me all I need to know, and maybe I just know you better than most. Let me ask you this from a different perspective. I'm not trying to beat the horse too much, but was getting Whitman a host something that could have kept you from having a bracket either in the first weekend, overall, second weekend, whatever, that wouldn't have been as expansive or as balanced or as competitively spread out? I don't know what the right term I'm looking for is, but having them host, would that have hurt your bracket elsewhere just to make sure they got that opportunity? And thus we'd be complaining about other things, is my point.
I don't know that that's necessarily the case. Again, there's a lot of factors that go into bracketing in general. Again, we had several brackets that were created that we were assessing, and the one that was approved was the one that had 3 flights in the first weekend.
It's your last year, Bethany. You can tell us. You can tell us you guys told no. And if I need to, I will call Luis and say, what the heck? Not that it's going to get us anywhere. The bracket's out. We're done. Quickly, where were hosts that aren't hosts, if that makes any sense? So we know Whitman is at Stout. It's being treated at Stout. It seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that those groups of 8, that the host seat is at the top and at the bottom for the 2 locations. But when I look at, for example, Colorado College Whitewater, is Whitewater the true host there? Or because based on the bracket, it seems that way? Or Colorado College, based on their resume, is, but we can't spend 3 flights to get people there either?
Whitewater is the true host.
Okay.
The only pod where the host is not the true host is Stout.
Great. Okay.
Where
so
Whitman
this question's done. This one's done. Great. Okay, we're good. I'm kidding. I didn't have that many about who was hosting. First round matchups. I know you were trying to avoid conference rematches. How much did you guys all look at either previous NCAA matches and or earlier season matchups, and how much did you try to avoid them?
Well, those are 2 things, again, put forward by the Champs Committee that we attempt to avoid if we can. And I think we did a pretty good job of that for the most part. Those are things we're cognizant of. Again, every now and then, you may have a situation that arises that may overlap, whether it's previous NCAA tournaments or a previous season matchup that's a non-conference matchup. We really try and avoid those things as best we can. And we were handcuffed in a couple of different areas simply because you've got a lot of teams from a lot of leagues and you've got geographic constraints. Those were pieces that played out in some different scenarios. But for the most part, I think we did a really good job of avoiding most of those situations.
To be honest, this is a great bracket in a lot of ways, Bethany, and I think a lot of us felt it was going to be that way per the conversations we had with you. So it's no surprise. I am picking at straws, so just an interesting one that Ryan picked up. He thought that maybe you could swap Elizabethtown and Amherst, for example. Elizabethtown's playing Brockport. They're at the Randolph-Macon pod. You've got Amherst playing Vassar at the Smith pod. Amherst is kind of nearby. I know we sometimes want to work with that. We don't want to send people 500 miles just to send 500 miles. But things like that, what kind of decisions go into that when you've got teams like an E-Town and an Amherst that are maybe very similar on where you end up placing them?
So there's a couple of different pieces to this. One, you've got an attempt to try and hold seed lines where we can. That's one piece of it. And I know the situation that you're referencing deviates that from that a little bit. You've got geographic constraints. And again, we are attempting to project out to the second weekend. And if you have different scenarios where people advance, what does that look like in terms of hosting opportunities? So we are not necessarily looking at the first weekend in isolation or a specific pod in isolation or seedings in isolation. It's a compilation of all of those factors in addition to what we referenced before, conference matchups, previous season matchups, previous NCAA tournament matchups. There's a lot of factors that go into play. So in a situation like that, that specific incident that you're referencing, there were a couple of those different factors that were at play that led to the decision to have that be the pod that it was.
Sure. I don't think overall anyone's complaining about it. It's just one of those fascinating, what if you had done this? I got a kick out of the fact, by the way, that Washington Jefferson and Washington Lee are side by side on the bracket, even though they're not side by side in matchups. It's just a little fun, me going, whoa, hey, oh, okay. And one is using the ampersand and one is not. Little things that I got a kick out of. How many people, I forgot to ask, how many people on this committee were able to participate?
Everybody except for 2.
That's probably more than I'm accustomed. Random question. Some people would say too many cooks in a kitchen can sometimes spoil whatever you're cooking. How do you divvy up the 8?
So we didn't really divvy anything up per se. We had a spreadsheet that we were working off of.
You're going to give us that, right, by the way?
Right, yeah, exactly. A shocker that I'm bringing up that I used a spreadsheet. Something new and different. I think I made about 4 new spreadsheets over the course of our bracketing exercise, which, again, our people get really excited when I say that I've got a new spreadsheet. They never know which one I'm referencing.
Carpal tunnel, Bethany.
That's exactly right. So we were all working off a shared spreadsheet and looking at different matchups, looking at the strength of different pods, and then switching things around accordingly. The nice thing about having 8 of the 10 people present during bracketing is we have that regional knowledge base about the teams that we're talking about and previous matchups, different factors we might want to consider in terms of travel time and historical matchups between those teams. So that piece was really helpful that we had those people involved as we were talking through different scenarios. And it wasn't too many cooks in the kitchen. There was good ideas about changes that we should make, trading in one team and trading out another. So that worked out really well for us.
You talk about looking out to that second weekend, you lose the hosting opportunity or the priority, with some possible ones. NYU is the biggest one that stands out, obviously. Illinois Wesleyan is a possibility. Again, you got to win to get through, right? So some of these points may be mute. I'm trying to double check if there's others. I think that's the only 2 really that are glaring. There could be others depending on results. And you have said on multiple occasions you had to bracket as if they're hosting, which is, I agree with you. You can't bracket on the what if and all of a sudden explain to NYU you're still traveling because we put 3 flights in there figuring you were going to be the only one we had to fly. That all said, what were some of the challenges you all had in that second weekend trying to keep the 1 through 8 stuff in place while also not just bandying about and putting the bracket wherever you wanted to put it?
The nice thing about having the NPI rankings is we've actually been discussing what those matchups could be for our 1 seeds and in our 2 seeds for a good amount of time now, because if you look back through the NPI rankings, there has been some shifting that we've needed to account for.
Yeah.
But a lot of those teams have stayed the same. And so we've had some time to really digest what those different matchups and sectionals could look like when it comes to, again, being cognizant of what those different seed lines are and trying to maintain those as best we can given all the different factors. So that's something that we've talked about for a while. In terms of teams that might not be able to host if their men's teams advance, we're tracking on who's put in sectional bids. On a previous call, I think we talked about reaching out to different people intentionally, suggest maybe they want to put in a bid to host the second weekend if that's something that they can facilitate on their campus. So we feel like we've got some pretty good options depending on what teams advance and different situations that play out in terms of hosts for the sectional weekend.
I think you talked a little bit about this with Pat. Forgive me, I was doing about 6 other things during that conversation. I was trying to tune into all of it. But when it comes to the host and the technology side of this, i.e., I know they only need to minimum have one camera, but they got to have replay capabilities. I could go in the weeds and ask, well, if they have a Hudl cam that's not broadcast, can that be used? All that stuff. But my main question is second weekend. If you're having to decide between hosts, depending on results, and one host has a single camera with minimal replay capability, and the second host has multiple cameras with a lot of replay capability, is that going to be a factor in helping decide where you put the sectional weekend, knowing that a game could come down to a decision that sends a team on to the Final Four?
I don't think that's going to be high up on the list of a deciding factor of who can host. People have requirements. If there's major technology issues at any site that we're considering for the sectional round, we certainly will be having conversations to make sure that those technology issues are addressed.
Fair.
I don't think that's going to prohibit people from hosting in the sectional round simply due to having lesser technology capability.
Yeah,
as long as they can meet the minimum requirements.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to get it out there and get it done with in case it ever were to come up. That said, if one place fits 2,500 and one fits 500, you're going to the 2,500 more likely, right? That's technically what the rules say.
I'm not sure what rule you're referencing, Dave.
There's a one about gym size and previous gates.
That's not something, speaking for myself, that's not something I'm leaning on heavily. We are cognizant of who a capable host is. We're cognizant of feedback we've gotten in the past. But if we've gotten feedback in the past about situations that might arise at any hosting site, those things have been addressed prior to now to try and eliminate issues in the future. So those things are listed as criteria. Speaking for me, when I'm considering a hosting site, I would not say that's high up on my list of factors because those are uncontrollable for a lot of institutions, right? Should an institution be limited in hosting simply because they have a smaller facility? You might have people with different opinions on that, but I think there's other factors at play that are contributing to that decision more so than that.
Certainly appreciate that. I'm asking these more on a preemptive, where would they send it if we got some squirrely results conversation. That said, it is in the criteria, and the Division III would like to get some of its money back. I realize I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek. What I mean to say is if you can get more gate at one place than another, I think I can understand that being a decision in the sectional rounds. Moving on, one thing I had an interesting conversation with some people about this NPI was with the old system, you dove into conversations about these teams that you appreciated who they played, who their biggest maybe top 3 wins were, who some of their not so great results were. And I'm not talking about 2-point win. I just mean they lost to so-and-so, who they played, how their resume came together. Now we're in an NPI and it's a number. Did you still try and have conversations to have a better understanding of who these programs were, or have we lost a little of that side of it with the NPI, and so the understanding of who these teams are, the context of who these teams are, has been lost?
I think it looks different than in the past. We still have 10 people representing 10 different regions on the national committee, and those people have a good pulse on the teams in their region. So we're able to have informed conversation as we're going through and having bracketing conversations and what those things look like. So I do think it's different. I would say we're not as intimately aware of all the nuances of every team because we're not spending 30 minutes deliberating the merits of one team versus another for the 7th spot in the regional rankings. And that doesn't mean that we're not aware of these teams and what it's done and what their resume looks like.
Hey, women's show in general was delayed. One of the reasons I had heard, and you and I talked off air, this may be debunked, but because I've said it on air, I want to at least present it this way, that it was delayed because maybe you guys had not gotten a host situation the way you wanted it, or maybe a host situation fell through. I really don't know all the particulars because, again, I didn't hear it anywhere close. It got delayed getting the bracket to the production crew, which thus delayed getting the bracket and show put together and out the door. First off, any of that accurate? Was there a delay? What was the cause, even if it felt minor?
Our bracket it was turned in slightly later than the designated time that we were just working through a couple of things. Did that impact the delay in production? Maybe. I actually don't know the reason for the delay in production. The men's show is delayed as well, so I don't know if that factored into things. I honestly don't have an answer about what the cause of the delay was. I simply know, just like everybody else, that there was a delay, and we were slightly delayed in turning our bracket in.
What was your delay, if you don't mind me asking?
We were working through some different situations.
I can read between the lines. I think everybody else can too. From a production perspective, and I think you and I can chat about this off air in more depth because I think you have that ability and some others to maybe have this conversation be real. While I didn't participate in this year's brackets, I have for a number of years, the shows. One of my frustrations as a producer myself is there is not enough time. You all, not you, Bethany, the perspective of Champs Committee and everybody else is we gave them the bracket 2 hours before they were going to record. This is plenty of time, but it's not. There's a lot of time that takes up to get everybody in the right place, double check spellings. The host take the time and try and write everything out. Now, granted, we know the team's a little bit more in advance. That is helpful, but you got to move things around and now talk about that matchup from my analyst perspective. What I might say about Washington and Lee against Merchant Marine is very different than I'd say Washington and Lee versus Transylvania. But from just a technical side, they've got a lot of work to do. I've made the argument for a couple of years now. Let's get this bracket out the door to the production company when you've gotten the night version done. Give them the bracket. We understand changes happen. They're given that caveat, but it gives them a chance to build. And then moving A, B, and C is 10 times faster than building the whole thing again. Is there a thought that we could do that to get these things tightened up a little bit and give those who are doing the show a better chance to do better shows? And by the way, this is for all sports.
I am one who likes to take situations that may arise and work on proactive measures moving forward. So to your point, I think that operations can always improve. I think that there are different things that we can have discussions about ways to improve those operations. I'm not in a position where I can say definitively, yes, we can make those changes. And at the same time, I do think that there is an opportunity to have conversations about ways to make the process more efficient for everybody. Yeah. So I agree. I agree with what's being stated. I don't have a definitive answer.
Sure.
I'm open to those conversations, and our group can certainly talk about what that might look like in the future. I know that there's some other logistical topics that our group probably wants to talk about. It's our first time through a new procedure of sorts, where in theory you have more time built in. There's different things that may come up that may prevent that time from being used as efficiently as possible, from things that result in some delays. Some of those things can be anticipated, some can't. I think it's an opportunity to review operations and continue to build to make things better in the future.
Bethany, run out of time. Really appreciate it. By the way, yeah, I didn't expect you to say, oh, yes, we will do that next time. I had no anticipation that would be your answer. Yes, I'd like a conversation to happen, and I'll say it on air. I'm happy to be part of those conversations, to bring a production perspective to the table. That's for all sports, because I want all these shows to sing, as they say in the production business. 2 quick things before I give you the final word. First off, a former chair in Megan Wilson tweets, end of an era, she was a great chair. Followed up by one of my colleagues, Scott, saying, can we sign Bethany to a lifetime post as committee chair? I know we can't do that part, but I would like to at least submit an idea that we've thrown around. Former committee chairs help guide or advise or whatever if necessary. And please, can you stick around for bracketing? That's all I ask.
I can, the fact that Megan got on Scott's show, I thought was awesome. I'm waiting for my invite. I'm excited. Megan is. Hey. I'll be on yours
I think my invites are pretty good, aren't they?
And they absolutely are. There is no doubt about that. Megan is one of the best, she, and she's going to be a site rep this weekend. She is so invested in women's basketball and always has been, and just does an excellent job. And the nice thing about our committee is we've got a great group of people who collaborate and work together, and we set up the next people for success. And we have a very, very long line of incredible chairs in women's basketball. So we've got an excellent reputation because of the people who have come before and the great work that they do and have done and continue to do. Again, the number of people who've been on the committee who serve as site reps and are passionate about what they do is a really cool element, and something that we don't take for granted. So those are very kind words from them. And I appreciate it. It's a group effort. We couldn't do it without all of us on the committee and the NCAA staff. And again, the people who've come before. It's a fun job. There's challenges at times, but we're passionate about what we do. And hopefully we put a good product out there. We're excited, for what's to come and, providing opportunities for teams.
Bethany, thank you again for all the time in the past month, behind the scenes, kicking my rear end when maybe I needed it too. People don't appreciate what that means, but I do. I look forward to chatting with you in the future, because I will bring you on in kind of a deep dive, as it were, after the fact, like off season, how this transition took place. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of the tournament. Enjoy your trip to Salem, your return trip to Salem. Enjoy this bracket. Enjoy how it's all come together. I appreciate your time. We may reach out with questions, but we'll try and give you a break. But before we sign off, any final thoughts for those who may be tuned in?
Sure, absolutely. We're pumped about Salem. I know I've said that before. They do an incredible job. And Dave, thanks for all you do. It's funny, there are a lot of people out there who block off time in their day to go and watch the show. I know there's some people who are watching right now who, again, have carved out this time, and they're excited about Hoopsville and tracking on D3 Hoops. So the work that you do is excellent. A lot of people pay attention to it. And I know this is a time of year that's exciting for everybody. Thanks again to all the people working behind the scenes. We've got some really good hosts this weekend. I sat on a pod call earlier with a group who I know is going to do an excellent job, and I'm hopping on another call in 10 minutes here. So we're trying to set people up for success and have really positive experiences for the teams, regardless of the site they're going to. So thanks to all those people who are doing the behind-the-scenes work. And again, Dave, thanks for everything. We're excited for the future. I'm excited to be a special guest and to talk about NPI more. Maybe I'll show a spreadsheet or two. That can be a grand revelation down the road. So
I'll take it. I'll take that deal. I'll take that deal. Bethany, take care of yourself. Thank you again. Thanks for the kind words. Thanks to all of you who are tuned in as well. And we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Sounds great. Talk to you soon.
Bethany Danley, Women's Chair and OAC Commissioner here on the Hoopsville Hotline. Appreciate her time. We're going to quickly take a break. When we come back, John Alisi will join us, Men's Chair and Baruch Heads basketball coach. You listen to Hoopsville, presented by D3 Hoops.
For the love of the game. But for those of us who are Division III student athletes, it's more than that. A lot more.
Sure, the game is important, but as we work so hard to build both mind and body, it's more about team.
That is why NCAA Division III teamed up with Special Olympics, and in giving the gift of sport to those for whom it seemed an impossible dream, we are working to make this a better world.
Help us keep that dream alive.
You can make a difference.
We are the coaches of women's basketball. We are leaders and teachers, dreamers and winners. We are professionals who conduct ourselves ethically and with integrity. We place the education, safety, and well-being of the athletes we coach above all else and teach them the fundamental values they need to succeed in life. We are coaches united for the good of our game and those who play it. We are the WBCA.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com. The National Association of Basketball Coaches is the nation's premier professional development and advocacy organization for basketball coaches at every level. The NABC strives to serve as the voice for coaches on national issues while advancing the core value of leadership, service, advocacy, education, and inclusion. To learn more about the NABC and to become a member, visit NABC.com and follow the NABC on social media at NABC 1927. That's NABC.com or NABC 1927 on social media.
Responsibility is being accountable for your words and actions, first and foremost. It also is an obligation to be a positive influence in the communities around you. Being in a D3 program, you're going to have lots of different opportunities. You're not just an athlete, you're also involved in student life. Your academics are extremely important. We give a lot of our student athletes responsibilities right from the start by giving them leadership opportunities, by having them engage in the community, be a positive influence. That's being a responsible person.
There are over 480,000 college athletes. Only 2% would go pro.
Dumping out of the commercial break because we got to get going. We got lots more to talk about here on Hoopsville. You got questions for us, you can email us or tweet us. Megan Wilson still listening into the show. Megan, just for the record, love you. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Maybe we'll get her and Bethany onto a call sometime at the same time. By the way, I would have reached out to Megan if we were still doing the old system to do mock selections. Megan was absolutely going to be part of our selection show if we had still had to do that. I promise you that. By the way, door is open because Tucker walked back into the studio. I'm just going to let it be. All right, let's turn our attention to men's basketball and the committee decisions that had to take place there. John Alisi joins us here on the Hoopsville Hotline, head coach of the Baruch men's basketball team. And John, I know you talked about it with Pat. My condolences, but also my thanks. You were not eliminated from these conversations because your team didn't make the tournament. It's a double-edged sword because, John, your team didn't make the tournament, and I'm very sorry.
No, I appreciate that, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. First and foremost, like I said with Bethany, how did the process go this time? We heard from you before you really dove in. How did the process go from diving in to making the tough decisions to finishing the bracketing and all that?
Yeah, but the process, it's cumbersome. It's a lot of back and forth. It's, your eyes get strained. You've got, games on in the room. You've got the NPI data refreshing. A lot of different brackets we're looking at, just different options and opportunities, thinking about flights and hosting possibilities. So all in all, the process went great. We had a great room. In the room, our committee, was on standby all day long, constantly bouncing things off of each other. So, we knew it was going to be different this year, being the first year with the NPI. But all in all, we were pretty happy with where we landed, and we know we're never going to make everybody happy, but the process went well overall.
curious where your biggest challenges were. Where did you guys have to spend a lot of your time?
Yeah, I look, the way our philosophy in building out the bracket was, we're trying to look, really build out from the sectionals backwards. We've been pretty transparent throughout that, we're never going to have a perfect bracket in terms of putting teams on that 1 through 64 seed lines, and 1 plays 64, 2 plays 63. Just unfortunately, that's just not the way, we're able to build a bracket at the Division III level. So I would say, the biggest challenge probably is just we're dealing with things in real-time data. We're at a place where we felt pretty good with where we were at over the course of 2 days from Friday to Sunday. We had a major shakeup in our top 16, and where we did not anticipate having to have a Texas pod. And, late Sunday night, we had to pivot to a Texas pod. So, you're just constantly dealing with different options and different brackets and then going through those with a fine-tooth comb to try to make it as balanced as possible. And, really with a look ahead to, where we think the sectionals can play out as well.
To that point where you have a curveball like that, to be devil's advocate, if you don't mind, John, why wasn't there thinking, hey, let's at least plan the what if, because we almost always have a Texas pod. So why would there not be at least a plan of the what if that they could produce something and what you would do with it?
Yeah, there was a plan in place, and we did look at it. But like I said, they were sitting at 23 or 24, I think, at some point on Friday, and they worked their way into it. So we had to kind of pivot back towards that plan where we're looking at it, where maybe we, had moved on, not moved on from it, but, taken a look in a different direction at that point.
Does having to spend time on something like that where you weren't expecting it cause you to then maybe not spend the time you wanted elsewhere, or you're so exhausted? And granted, we have more time on bracketing, so I am trying to balance the old ideas of this versus the new, but you get so exhausted with the process, or it's getting so late that maybe other things don't get spotted because you ended up having to dedicate time elsewhere.
No, I don't think so. I don't think exhaustion plays into it at all. I mean, look, it's a labor of love. So, we're all very invested in putting out the best bracket, and for however long we need to stay there and get that done, we'll do it. But there are other factors involved, right? We need to have our bracket completed that night, at least, we'll take fresh eyes, look at it the next morning. But there's other things in terms, we've got to get information out to hosts. We've got to get information out to schools so they can plan travel. We've got to have officials and site reps signed, planned out. So there's a lot of moving pieces in terms of, we can't, take it right up until we send it off to you guys to produce your show, where we have to have, basically the bulk of the bracket done, by Sunday night.
When it comes to previous matchups, whether it's in the NCAA tournament conference matchups, we know there's a directive on, or
Yep.
earlier in the season matchups, how much did you try to avoid, because there were some you didn't?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the directive is, we're not going to put conference opponents against each other in the first round. That's the directive. I think while historically, we try to avoid repeat matchups, it's not something that we're charged to do. So, if we feel good about where we're at, and the bracket makes sense, and we feel it's balanced across the board, it is something that we could do and have done.
So in the Emory pod, for example, you had Guilford, Barry, Emory, and Huntington. Earlier season matchups were avoided. But when we go to Tufts, that pod just seems wonky, especially starting with the fact that Yeshiva's playing Tufts, and that is an earlier this season matchup, a game that they did play within, I think, 8 points to each other. Was that one that was discussed? And I know Yeshiva brings a characteristic that you've got to have an institution that can maybe handle some of the special circumstances, whether it's playing earlier and some of the others in just the general region. But was that discussed, and what was that discussion like?
Yeah, I think with the Emory one, the biggest differentiator between Emory and the Tufts situation is, the proximity to Emory and Barry. They play each other all the time. So I think, also we had the ability to make that flip with Huntington and Emory. They were close enough that, we felt okay making that switch. And given the fact that Emory pod was a unique one in terms of travel logistics, that there were only, Huntington and Berry, without putting them on a flight, Emory was the only place that they could get to.
So what's the Tufts pod? You've got a scenario there where I'm quickly looking at it. I lost place where it was. Pardon me. Here we go. So you have Tufts and Yeshiva as 2 versus 14. And then you've got St. Joe's versus Redlands as 2 7s. Let's start with the Yeshiva one. Again, that's a rematch of earlier in the year. What was the premise with allowing that to be? I know you said multiple times have been played between Berry and Emory, but what about Tufts and Yeshiva?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think at the point where we were at, we felt okay leaving that matchup where it was. We felt we had a balanced bracket. Obviously, if we can avoid those things, we will. Not saying we couldn't avoid it, but our charge is not necessarily to avoid repeat matchups if we, in the first round for non-conference opponents.
With Redlands and St. Joe's, again, it's essentially 2 7s playing each other. You're sending Redlands all the way out of California to the East Coast to play that. It feels like that might have been an NPI matchup number thing that didn't work. Was it almost forced because you needed to send Redlands somewhere? Like, we're trying to figure out why that 7v7 made any sense.
Yeah, so I think when you look at the flights, right, you got to get them somewhere. And, for us, once you put a team on a plane, especially a team like Redlands, who is not a lower seeded team, you kind of want to make sure you're enhancing, keeping the student athlete experience intact as well. I think, if we could avoid a flight having to make a connection or then having to take a 4-hour bus ride at the tail end of their flight, we were looking for a little bit more of a soft landing in terms of their experience and their travel.
Were you concerned that Redlands sits as a 26 in the national ranking, St. Joe's a 27, that they're essentially 0.3 NPI, tenths off of each other, that's just too tight?
No, I think that you're going to see those types of matchups all across. I mean, when we look at the bracket, we're not necessarily looking at their NPI numbers. We're looking basically at how is each pod seeded. We look at, we're not looking so much at when we're building out the bracket, you have 4 number 1s, 4 number 16s. We kind of look at it more in quads where we have 16 1 lines, we have 16 2 lines, we have 16 3 lines, and 16 4 lines. And, we're kind of building out the bracket that way. If we had the opportunity to have unlimited flights and move teams around, anywhere we wanted, we could certainly narrow that down a little bit more. But, we try not to move too much. There are instances where we do have to move a team up from a 2 to a 3, from a 3 to a 2, or down from a 2 to a 3. We have some instances of that, but we do try to limit that. But moving teams sideways along those 1, 2, and 3, 4 lines was something that we knew we were going to have to do from the start.
One that jumped out that was interesting was the Platteville and IWU pods. Platteville is playing Grinnell, essentially a 14. I'm trying to find Illinois Wesleyan. I somehow misplaced it. I apologize here. Oh, here they are. They're a 3 taking on BLC as a 16. The question that was raised that I thought was interesting was that, I'll quote it. Platteville gets Grinnell, essentially the 14 seed that should be matched with IWU, who gets Bethany Lutheran, the lowest overall seed that should be at Platteville. That's the premise from outside that. You could literally switch those with no geographic implication. Is there something else we're missing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot, and there's context, and I'm not going to speak directly to every single piece of it, but I think there's a ripple effect every time you move one team somewhere. It's going to affect another team somewhere else. So, when we're looking at it as a committee, we're looking at it from this 30,000-foot view. We have an incredibly passionate fan base in Division III. That is, we knew we were going to nitpick and look through the bracket with a fine-tooth comb, but a lot of times the way it's being looked at, they're looking at it from their perspective as it relates to their teams and their fan bases. So,
there might have been a previous matchup there too that maybe you were trying to avoid as well.
And there's a lot of things. If you move this team off of this line, how is that going to affect another pod somewhere else? Sometimes it's not always as simple as just flipping those two teams. It becomes like a third team gets involved somewhere else, and now you've got to adjust another bracket there. To your point, maybe there's a repeat matchup. Maybe it brings another conference team into play there. There are a lot of things. A lot of things in play that not everybody is privy to.
Interesting that you guys had Franklin and Marshall hosting Randolph-Macon's pod. Granted, Randolph-Macon can't host because the women are this opening weekend. So you got to send them somewhere. But you send them to what seems like a tougher seed than I would have expected for a 2 in Randolph-Macon to get. Case in point, Hamden-Sydney's a 3, and they're hosting TCNJ. I feel like TCNJ FNM could get flipped, and we may have just a better scenario. TCNJ supposedly put into host, but you might have a better opportunity for Randolph-Macon to get a better seated position as the 2 who has to hit the road. What was those discussions like?
Yeah, again, a lot of factors. We have, in our top 8, we have, multiple Northeast teams. We've been very tilted towards the Northeast. We are able to, look, as we get down towards Randolph-Macon and not being able to use them as a host this first weekend with their women. We looked at a number of options, for both them and NYU in our top 8 as to where we were going to place them. And after looking at a number of different options and alternatives, we felt okay with sending them to Franklin and Marshall that first weekend.
Another one that popped out to me was where NYU went. They're going all the way down to York. By the way, side note, York and FNM both hosting within a half an hour I found fascinating as well. But you're sending them all the way down to York, whereas Drew, as the 3, we know they couldn't host, is getting sent to the 5 in Ramapo. It almost felt like NYU to Ramapo and Drew to York maybe made a little bit more sense. Drew doesn't feel like they're being treated as a top 16 there, almost a top 8, whereas NYU is getting sent on a longer trip. Were there conversations about things like that?
Yeah, there were a lot of conversations, a lot of different brackets, in the mix, kind of comparing one bracket to another. As things change, you got to throw one out, but there's a lot of things in the fire throughout the day. As we do this, one of the exercises we do is we look at each pod and we kind of figure out what the balance is for each pod, and then as we take it out, further, we're looking at it from, when you start combining pods, as you get into the sectional, you're trying to balance those out and weight those out as much as possible. And as we went through the exercise, we felt like we had a very balanced weighted pod and bracket. So we felt comfortable with the decisions that we made there.
When I look at the Trinity pod, I know you had a lot of New England teams, but when I look at the Trinity Connecticut pod, you've got them playing Newman, Keene State playing Clark. It's a very, forgive the term, it's the only one in my head, I haven't had enough coffee, old bracketing style mentality of having the locals kind of playing each other. And I realize there's a lot of factors in play, but it feels like we had enough teams, at least in the Mid-Atlantic on up, where you could diversify a bit. You could send Clark somewhere else. You could send maybe Newman somewhere else. Newman might have been okay there, but bring someone else up is my point, and not have so many of backyard teams essentially playing each other. That's kind of back to my earlier question. You're so focused on trying to deal with a Texas pod that maybe something else gets missed, or do you have 4 different groups working on things and the mentality in one group is not the mentality in another?
No, we work together in unison with it. Like I said, we had multiple iterations of brackets. The bracket, the final pod there may not have been what was put forth in previous ones, but as we got there, we looked at it. It's a pretty weighted bracket. We feel, while they are all New England Northeast type teams, they represent 4 different regions as well. on there. Trinity being in Region 1, Newman Region 5, Keene State Region 2, and Clark Region 3. I'm sorry, I may have flipped. Did I flip those?
Clarkson 2.
Clarkson, I'm saying 2. So so we have
Keene.
3 regions represent. Yeah, so we have, my apologies. We had 3 regions represented in that one. But, we had, we did have 11 of our 16 pods with 3 or more regions represented. So, that is something that we try to do, is we try to have diversity. We try to have, different regions represented in each of the pods, and we try to make them as balanced as possible, both, for that first weekend as well as potentially the second weekend as well. We want to have balanced pods and balanced bracket.
Yeah, just to follow up, Keene and Clark are in the exact same region. They didn't play each other this year, but that's not an abnormal matchup in the general things. Last year we had a pod at a SCIAC team. Yes, a second one was in that pod. You potentially could have had that again. I know we don't love the second weekend possibility of a SCIAC matchup. I appreciate trying to avoid that. Have you gotten flack, though, for sending 2 SCIACs all the way to the East Coast?
Look, we're catching flack for a lot of things. Again, it just kind of comes with the job. So, again, we felt comfortable with our decisions. You had to fly certain teams somewhere. Somebody's going to have to fly. Either teams are going to have to fly west to east. Some teams are going to have to fly east to west. Didn't necessarily, have better options there, but ultimately we felt okay with where we landed.
We're on limited time, so I'm trying to crunch. Now we're looking at sectionals. You men get the hosting opportunity. That kind of helps you a bit when you plan, right? Yes, you lose it in the opening weekend, but at least in the second weekend, you have a better appreciation of where you might be able to put some of these games, i.e. NYU goes through, it's going to NYU. If Wesleyan goes through, it's going to Wesleyan, et cetera, et cetera. But how does that impact your bracketing in terms of how many flights you hope you can, forgive the phrase, get away with? My point being that you're trying to utilize. How much is that second weekend helpful in that sense when you're bracketing, that you already kind of have a sense of how many flights you're going to get?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been very open about this. We want to limit flights as much as we can, right? That is just the directive we're given. If we don't have to put teams on planes and fly them all over the country, we won't have to. But however, we're not being precluded from flying teams if we need to, and if it's what's in the best interest of our tournament, we can put it forth and go from there. So, it's definitely in our minds. Certainly, regionality, making sure that when we get to that second weekend, we have balance. It's not tilted too heavily in one side or the other. So all of those things do come into play as you're putting the bracket together.
I asked Bethany this question. I don't think you guys were impacted by it this time around. I think the delay on the men's show was not. I don't think it was production based. I think it was encoding based on Turner's side, which I know happened last year. That said, the idea of that you guys get the bracket done at night. What about getting the bracket to the production team at that point with a caveat and an understanding that changes could take place, and those changes will be double checked. Production team can provide that to liaison so they can make sure that those changes were effective and no mistakes get on the air. But give the production team more time to put this together when you release the bracket to them in the evening. Is that something you guys would be amenable to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't think that is, I don't necessarily think that's a committee decision. I think that's a little bit above my pay grade, but we're certainly, open. But
they ask your feedback.
Yeah, and we'll put forth whatever, recommendations or feedback we've gotten. And, we're constantly looking for ways to enhance the championship and enhance the experience for all involved. So certainly something we can bring forth and run it up the flagpole appropriately.
Quickly, we knew Drew couldn't host. Anybody else that you wanted to host that you couldn't, or how many did you have?
No, Drew was the main one, in that top 16 that did not have the ability to host.
And we should point out, this was a known factor for a long time. Drew was just not going to have that capability. They had something else that had been booked there for a long time. This is not a surprise to anybody. We understood this scenario, I think, for the most part. Going in, I know you mentioned it on Sunday's show. This is not a knock on Drew. It's not that they screwed up. This is happened. WPI had a robotics competition one year. We've been down this road before. Any other challenge that you had that we haven't discussed that you think is helpful for the viewers at home to understand?
No, I mean, I think this entire year, we've said it from the beginning. It's been a transition year. It's going to be the first year, in the NPI era. We had, where most of our time in past years has been spent on selections and ranking teams and ordering teams and getting them in the right spot. This year was much more, putting a bracket together and tweaking, as we needed to during the day. So, just an adjustment. And I think as we continue to do it, as we continue to familiarize ourselves with the process and the data, will just hopefully become easier and a smoother process moving forward. But inevitably, every year you're going to run into hiccups with, whether it be hosting sites or conflicts with the women. So, you just got to remain flexible and be ready to tackle whatever challenges are thrown at you.
I forgot to ask, how many of your guys were on the committee were able to work on all of this?
Yeah, we all were working. We were in contact throughout the day. We had,
nobody was pulled out of it?
No, nobody was pulled out. So we had everybody, throughout the day and, sending out our options and getting different eyes and fresh eyes on it as well.
John, I know you got to get going. I appreciate the time you gave us, but I do want to give you the chance to give that final word. I know we'll talk more down the road, and I look forward to seeing you in Fort Wayne, but any final thoughts you'd like to share with those who might be tuned in?
Yeah, well, as always, Dave, just thank you and your team for, all that you do for Division III hoops. I mean, it shines such a great spotlight on our student athletes. This is the fun part, right? The coming at, the bracket is revealed yesterday. The passion and the engagement from our fans and student athlete is what make college sports great. So we certainly don't shy away from discussion. But we're excited to get the game started. I think once the balls are tipped on Friday, now we're in the most fun part of the tournament. And we're very excited to partner once again with Fort Wayne this year. They have been incredible hosts. It has been an incredible venue these last few years partnering with them. And we are very excited to get back there for what, we're expecting to be another great championship.
And one more year next year at Fort Wayne, right? Before we take a break and go elsewhere, right? I have that right?
Correct. Next year we will host the quarterfinals and semifinals at Fort Wayne before the joint championship in Indianapolis.
Awesome. Hey, John, thanks for your time. I know you got to run. Appreciate it. Look forward to catching up with you down the road. I'm sure there's questions we didn't get to that other people might have. We'll maybe fire them to you there. But take care in the meantime and enjoy it.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
John Alesi joining us here on the Hoopsville Hotline. Appreciate his perspective on all of that. Going to take a very quick break, and we're going to quickly run something from Ryan about mileage and how it's playing a role. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3 Hoops. Back with more after this.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Coach of the Year, Administrator of the Year, All-America Team, Wade Trophy. The WBCA doesn't just honor coaches, but players, administrators, and much more. The WBCA strives to honor those who have contributed to the advancement of women's basketball. Celebrate the present, honor the past, look to the future.
I believe sportsmanship is it's a mutual admiration and respect for your.
Cutting off the commercial there. Sorry, it ran a little longer. For some reason, my system didn't want to kick in. All right, so we hinted at this earlier. There's a bit of a mileage problem. If you remember, there's a 500-mile rule with where teams can go and where they can play games and all of that jazz. The problem arises in the sense that this is an official NCAA website that you go to, and it's changed over the years. It used to be one thing. I think the website was TEC, for example. It is slightly changed now. In the past, we've had issues with it that were cleared up, fixed, and they were avoided. Seems those issues might be back, and there may be bigger problems, especially when it applies, in this case, to Christopher Newport, but it's applying elsewhere. Ryan Scott put this together to explain it.
Hello, this is Ryan Scott, the lead columnist for D3Hoops.com, doing a quick explainer about one of the possible scenarios on our bracket and an issue we've discovered with the NCAA mileage calculator. And we want to thank Matt Snyder of the D3 Datacast who brought it to our attention. We've been investigating since he brought this up. So what you see in front of you is the men's basketball bracket, which is governed by what we call the 500-mile rule in the NCAA. If the distance between a team and where they're playing is 499 miles or less, the NCAA pays for a bus for them to get there. If it's 500 miles or more, they provide a plane flight. And because of the limited budget in Division III, we really try to keep as often as possible the teams under 500 miles. Where that comes to play in this tournament this year is in this Trinity bracket. There are other places, but this is the one that we're interested about today. If all of the seeds from this quadrant go through, Trinity would be the top seed there. Montclair State would be presumably the 4th seed in this quadrant. And Randolph-Macon would be the 2nd. All of those are well within 500 miles of Trinity, Connecticut. They can drive there, no problem. Christopher Newport would be the 3 seed here. And that's where things become interesting. So if you plug Christopher Newport in to the NCAA official mileage calculator and go to Trinity, Connecticut, you get a calculation of 514 miles. Which is over the limit. There would be a plane flight involved in this. However, what's really interesting is if you put Christopher Newport in and then add Virginia Wesleyan, you get just 27 miles away. They're very close institutions. And then you plug Virginia Wesleyan in and we go back to Trinity, Connecticut, you get 469. And if you add 27 to 469, you're only at 496 miles, which would be under the limit. And Christopher Newport would therefore be drivable if somehow they went from their school to Virginia Wesleyan and then to Trinity. What it means is that if we go back, it won't let me go back on this. If we go back to Christopher Newport to Trinity, you get the 514 miles. This is not the shortest distance. When we talk to the NCAA about that, they've kind of pushed us around to a bunch of different people. I'm not sure anyone knows how this mileage calculator actually works, but we keep being told that this is the shortest distance between two schools. And clearly we've proven that's not true. If we look at the map, you can see 1 Avenue of the Arts, the exact address that's in the NCAA mileage calculator for Christopher Newport, and then 300 Summit Street in Hartford, Connecticut, where it is for Trinity. The fastest route to get there is to go up I-95. I mean, it's debatable whether it's fastest. You see all the construction, and there's certainly traffic that way. But the way that Google tends to think is usually the fastest is this one that comes out at 514 miles, right? What we have, and if you go from Virginia Wesleyan and Virginia Beach, you have this route up through the Delmarva Peninsula here, and over the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. Down here, as you go across the entrance to Chesapeake Bay, there's a combination of bridge over the water and tunnels under the water. This has a toll that for coach buses is $40 each way. And we're curious if indeed that 514 is the route that they want us to go up on I-95, if maybe they're taking into consideration the cost of the tolls for this. And if there's some sort of balance when that was created. We have not heard back from the NCAA on that. But if you go this direction, that is where you find the 496-mile route. This will not necessarily come into play here because Trinity is likely to host regardless of whether they fly Christopher Newport there or put them on a bus. But it does come into play for Christopher Newport hosting in a number of different situations. We've found the same mileage problem for any team in New England. So Wesleyan is another one that appears to be over 500 miles from Christopher Newport, but in actuality is not if you use the Virginia Wesleyan first thing. And the mileage works out the same all the way up. Several years ago in the women's tournament, Christopher Newport was denied a chance to host. At the time, we were working with a 600-mile radius instead of a 500-mile radius, and it was said that Tufts and Christopher Newport were more than 600 miles apart. And so in order to save flights, they moved that to a place in between. If you do this same process for Tufts and Christopher Newport and going to Virginia Wesleyan first, you find out it's less than 600 miles, right? And so even though the NCAA mileage calculator is the official way to calculate mileage, we're not sure it's actually doing what it says it is. Now, the possibility is they are taking in tolls and some of those other things into consideration as part of the mileage calculator, but we have yet to hear back from the NCAA about how it's constructed and whether anything beyond straight distance is included. So until then, we'll have to find out, I guess, if Christopher Newport and Trinity both end up in the same second weekend quadrant, whether they're getting on a plane or a bus.
Appreciate Ryan give us that insight on it. We'll link that onto our show page and send out a link later about it as well if you want to deep dive into Ryan's quick expose on that. Couple of notes. I don't think tolls is playing a role in this. There are tolls technically if you go up the Western Shore through D.C. and Baltimore. Yes, there are ways of avoiding tolls. You don't have to take, they can't take some sections in Virginia and D.C. because their buses aren't allowed in those toll areas. You can avoid the tunnels in Baltimore, putting you on the west side of the city. You obviously can't take the bridge anymore, which is another toll. And then you hit tolls when you get up to Delaware, which technically you would have hit anyway. And if you come up that Eastern Shore way, maybe you I assume from the map, you keep going up Delaware. You don't jump back over to the Western Shore. I just don't think tolls are a factor there. A reminder, the committee has to follow the 500-mile rule. If a school decides, hey, we're going to bus anyway, we know we're at 505, don't worry about it. The committee has to make decisions before that is a known factor. So if it hits 500 miles, it is considered a flight in the eyes of the NCAA, in the eyes of Division III. Whether a school plans to use that flight or use a bus, which is cheaper, does not matter. It doesn't factor in to that decision factor. So that's why this mileage calculator is so important. I'm going to remind you of another debacle back on the old system. Second weekend decisions came out. We got surprised. Hope was in a pod with Geneseo and some others, and they put the pod in Geneseo, saying that Hope could get to Geneseo in upstate New York with no problems within the 500 miles. They were correct based on the mileage calculator. What the mileage calculator was not doing was calculating the fact that Hope would have to go through Canada, crossing in Detroit, coming out at Niagara Falls, to get to Geneseo to be under 500 miles. That is not something they want to do. They don't want passports and all that other factor to be in play. It appears this new calculator is doing this again. It is putting that Canada travel back into the equation. And while it's not come up here, it's a problem. The fact that Ryan has gotten pushback from people is frustrating. And we're not getting pushback from national committee members. We're getting pushback from those in Indianapolis who either don't understand the system or don't want to deal with this system. And it's going to cause a problem like it did. That Geneseo decision, within a couple hours, they had to rescind it. And I believe they sent everybody to Hope, if memory serves. No, somebody else. It was somebody in the middle. So Geneseo came to them, Hope came to them. We can't have these embarrassments when they're avoidable. This has been flagged. We've tried to go through official channels. It's gotten pushed back. We got to get this fixed. Appreciate Ryan's insight. We'll see if we learn anything more about it, and we will dive into it further when necessary. Again, we will put links to Ryan's video there on the show page and elsewhere when we can. And with that, we'll take another break. When we come back, let's talk to programs who are dancing in the tournament for the first time in a long time. We'll start with the SLIAC champs, the first ever SLIAC champs for the Principia women's basketball program. Ramiro Dominguez will join us to talk about his team and just how well they are doing this season. Congrats on making the tournament. We'll hear from him coming up. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3 Hoops. Back with more when we come back. The National Association of Basketball Coaches is the nation's premier professional development and advocacy organization for basketball coaches at every level. The NABC strives to serve as the voice for coaches on national issues while advancing the core value of leadership, service, advocacy, education, and inclusion. To learn more about the NABC and to become a member, visit NABC.com and follow the NABC on social media at NABC1927. That's NABC.com or NABC1927 on social media.
Something I discovered in myself is that if I have a goal, and I can accomplish it.
The well-rounded experience.
At a Division III school, you primarily a student athlete, so the school is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual.
It helps a lot that you have a family with your team that can guide you.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
In any way that we can.
To get a friend home safe.
To never blame the victim.
It's on us.
To stand up.
To make our community safe for all.
It's on us.
It's on us to look out for each other at parties.
It's on us.
To be more than just a bystander.
To step up and say something.
It's on us, all of us.
To stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
We are the coaches of women's basketball. We are leaders and teachers, dreamers and winners. We are professionals who conduct ourselves ethically and with integrity. We place the education, safety, and well-being of the athletes we coach above all else and teach them the fundamental values they need to succeed in life. We are coaches united for the good of our game and those who play it. We are the WBCA.
I learned a lot of valuable lessons playing college football. I never thought about the health benefits of exercise until I actually started to talk to coaches in college. It's not only just for performance, it's for life. My coaches instilled the importance of well-being, not only building up strength, mental health, getting enough sleep, eating properly is all what it is to be healthy. I decided that I want to go on a personal trainer and share my knowledge that I obtained in college about physical and mental well-being.
For the love of the game, but for those of us who are Division III student athletes, it's more than that, a lot more.
Sure, the game is important, but as we work so hard to build both mind and body, it's more about team.
That is why NCAA Division III teamed up with Special Olympics, and in giving the gift of sport to those for whom it seemed an impossible dream, we are working to make this a better world.
Help us keep that dream alive.
You can make a difference.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com. The National Association of Basketball Coaches is the nation's premier professional development and advocacy organization for basketball coaches at every level. The NABC strives to serve as the voice for coaches on national issues while advancing the core value of leadership, service, advocacy, education, and inclusion. To learn more about the NABC and to become a member, visit NABC.com and follow the NABC on social media at NABC1927. That's NABC.com or NABC1927 on social media.
Something I discovered in myself is that if I have a goal, I can accomplish it.
The well-rounded experience.
At a Division III school, you primarily a student athlete, so the school is really shaped around you developing yourself as a complete individual.
It helps a lot that you have.
Cutting off the commercial break because for some reason we had some tech issues there trying to get our next guest on the air. It's funny, I was ahead of things when it started and fell behind very quickly. I'm your host, Dave McHugh. Welcome into the matinee edition of Hoopsville. On Tuesdays, we're breaking down the brackets. We've heard from the committee chairs. To be honest, love to have talked to John Alisi a little bit more than we did. We didn't. But that's not John's fault by any stretch of the imagination. He's got things he's got to do, and we had a great conversation with Bethany that I allowed to run a little too long. We didn't get everything answered. I want to quickly correct a misnomer that I already saw on YouTube. Remember, the first round matchup rule is about conference rematches, not non-conference rematches. So while we wouldn't want to see Tufts playing Yeshiva in the first round on the men's side because it is a rematch of an earlier game this season, there's no rule against it. Could it have been avoided? I would argue yes, it still could have been avoided. There's one caveat with all that. Yeshiva does need some requirements in the community that they're going to in terms of meals and accommodations and all of that due to the Sabbath and having playing a game earlier on a Friday and the potential of playing later on Saturday. That could have eliminated some of the places they wanted to send them to as well. I don't know those particulars. I'm guessing. So maybe some of the other factors that went into play there. But yes, a lot of us felt we could have had a different matchup. All right, we're pivoting, talking about teams who are in the dance for the first time in forever, let's just say. In some cases, literally forever, have never been there before. Some in a very long time. We're starting with one who's never been there. Either program. Principia has never been to the NCAA tournament, and the women's program won its first ever SLIAC title over the weekend. Absolutely incredible in every way, shape, and form. To join us to talk about it is the head coach of the women's program. It's Ramiro Dominguez. Coach, I forgot to check with you. Hope I said that right.
Yes, you said that perfectly. That was great. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. I get the win. Yeah. Coach, first and foremost, we should point out everybody calls you Coach Rowe.
Yes.
Congratulations. This is a huge step for a program that we should remind everybody had to shut down the season 4 seasons ago and had 1 win 3 seasons ago, 3 winning seasons since you're in your NCAA tournament. This is incredible. Congrats.
Thank you so much. It's just a tribute to the belief in myself from the administration, from Coach RAD and Ann Pearson and the President John Williams at that time and President Norton now, and then these incredible women that joined us that said yes when I asked them, hey, would you please come to Principia? Like, is this something that would work in your future? And we were just blessed with this incredible group of women.
Yeah, what was the I'm trying to find the right word. What was the impetus on your end to take this program over, and what did you hope you could accomplish when?
I really wanted to bring it back to being healthy. So my idea was that to come in here and make it where it was viable, and it wasn't they weren't they were recruitable, like it was someplace that people wanted to go, someplace people wanted to be at, and they got to experience the great community that we have here at Principia. And I really wanted that to become a staple of that. What I was looking for was just for us to continue getting better and improve as time went on. And my timetable wasn't year 4. My timetable was maybe year 10, maybe year 12. We're starting to really turn the corner, and be super competitive. But we got in a really incredible group of women as sophomores, freshmen, and sophomores, and we've had a couple of transfers in who have just really made a huge impact on our team. And we do a really great job of gelling and them loving each other. So that has just been, a tribute to them and the people they are.
Well, it came together nicely too. You're the first 4 seed to ever win the SLIAC championship. You knocked off Westminster, correct? Sorry, Westminster of Missouri in the semi, 63-45, and then. Am I getting this right? I may have it wrong. First ever win, or the first time in 20-something games against Webster, you got to win 69-67. That game, The game's at Westminster.
Yeah. Yes, that's the first time in 10 years, 20 tries to beat Webster, as they're very well coached. They're very they're the great talents. They're a very, very good team, as well as Westminster. And in our quarterfinal game, we had to beat Greenville, which is another very tough team for us. And so we had a rough 5 days, of interesting 5 days where we come out on top, but 3 very, very good coach teams and just 3 very quality opponents.
You had to, the Westminster game being 18 points. They were tied with Webster as the top 2 in the conference. That's a resounding win. That had to help going into the Webster game, going, hey, we've just thumped these guys by 18. While we may not thump Webster by that, we can play with them.
Yeah, we felt like we had, when our first 2 meetings with Westminster, we hadn't played to our abilities. We had not played as confident as we needed to, and we made some adjustments, and the women come out and really responded well and locked down in the 4th quarter. We were down 13 in that Westminster game going into the 3rd, or halfway through the 3rd, and we came back and we went on a 41-5 run. And then we ended that game, and then we got Webster, who we knew was going to be a tough opponent. They were very physical and very well coached, and so we knew there was going to be a lot of pressure. And we had a game plan. They went in there and executed that absolutely to a T.
We should point out earlier in the season, January 21st, against Webster at home, you lose 81-44. Part of a 3-game losing streak, and ended up being part of 5 losses in 6 games. You then saw them February 20th at their place and lost 88-66. So a 63-45 win is a heck of a turnaround. The Webster games were within 10 points earlier in the season, but it's that Westminster one that really jumped out at me. is there a moment in a game like that where you can look at the opponent on the floor or look down at their bench and realize, oh, we might have them here. They are completely discombobulated.
They're so well coached, and I have such respect for Coach Washington and that team over there. And they have an incredible player who's been our 3-time Player of the Year, Annette Ramirez. And we knew that if we could, and in the past 2 years, we have won at our place and lost at theirs. So if we knew that if we could, somewhat keep her in front of us and control her points total, then we could possibly, be close in the game. And we felt like we had a running chance at it if we could attack them at that point. And so it was good to see to the end. But I'm a firm believer in that we're going to play all the way to the very last seconds, as if we're down 20, not as if we're up at all. So we try to play all super hard. So I never really sighed a breath of relief or anything in that Westminster game until it was like 18 seconds left. So I was like, okay, we can stop.
You finally realized there were not enough points and not enough time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I get it. Yes. You've got one senior on this team in the Colombian Carolina Rojas.
Yes.
You've got a bunch of underclassmen, I'd love to note, who are making huge impacts. You start with Taylor Brown, the junior, 3-time SLAC, second-team All-Conference honoree. Ariana Williams is a 3-time All-Defensive Team honoree in the SLAC. I'm going to make sure I get it right. Lamaya Terrell earned a SLAC All-Defensive Team nod this year after setting a program record with steals. Trinity Matthews, a junior. By the way, all these have been juniors. SLAC Tournament MVP. Hannah Myers, also a junior who transferred in, team's top 3-point shooter. Game-winning layup, though, at the buzzer to win the SLAC. Then you've got Genesis Santiago, a sophomore, hit the game-tying shot with 13 seconds left in the final. And Carolina Rojas, who we mentioned, the only senior on the team, has started since her freshman year. I wanted to get those out, one, because Duncan was so great at getting me that information, but second, it shows me how many different facets and capabilities you have. This isn't the Rojas show. This isn't the Brown show. This is a deep team that is young and getting a ton of experience through this, but as you said, has also come together to really kind of be a sum of all their parts.
And that's been the great thing about these women is they come in the very first day and, just started communicating with each other and just started picking each other up, and we're always there supporting each other. And we have one senior, so we have a little bit of leadership, but the juniors, Taylor Brown and Ari, have been here. They came here as freshmen 3 years ago, and they're juniors now. But they kind of know the system. They kind of know what we're trying to talk about. And they kind of know our culture, and they all bought into that culture. And the culture really, and they kind of drive the culture themselves. So it's a lot of things that I don't have to coach. I don't have to coach culture. I have to coach effort. I have to coach energy. They bring that, and they kind of know where the light switch is. They're just great, incredible people. And this is not, Principia is a very, it's very tough educational place to be, academic place to be at. So they do a great job in the classroom. They do a great job in the court. They do a great job in our community. All the women that you listed are part of our student government and part of their house government. Like, they're just great additions to our campus. So we're just so thrilled for them, and I'm happy for them. And everybody's, a lot of the focus, people in the past or people around me want to talk about, what I feel about it. I'm just so thrilled for them. I do this for them. I do this because of them. And I'm just so happy for them. To see their faces at the end of that was such a blessing. So it's just going to be great to see their faces when we get the Whitewater.
Yeah. Proves once again the Division III known entity that student athletes give more than just being athletes on their campuses. By the way, quick note, Brown, 13.3 points a game. Williams, Matthews, Terrell, and Myers all scored more than 8 points a game. All of them contribute in rebounding and assists and steals. Let me see here. Myers has 41, Terrell 98 steals. The other three, Brown, Williams, and Matthews, 50 plus. It is pretty darn impressive, including Williams and Matthews in blocks. So you take this season, Coach, which officially ended at 17-11, 11-7 in conference play. You're still dancing, and you've got a bit of a beast in Whitewater. We'll talk about the excitement of being there in a moment. But what do you know about Whitewater? What are you expecting from the Warhawks?
We're expecting them to be. They're extremely well coached. They are very patient on offense. They're long and they're tough, and they like to get to their spots and they like to manipulate the offense with, different pass cuts and different things like that. The ideal for us is, just try to keep them in front of us, try to use our speed and athleticism to disrupt some passing lanes and, cause them a little bit of take some more difficult shots. Now, they're really good at hitting difficult shots. So we gotta be understanding with ourselves and be patient and understand we're going to give up some, but we want to make everything difficult, and we don't want to give up easy ones. We want to be very patient and understanding with ourselves and try to stay in the game as close as we can and get our run, because everybody's going to get a run during the game at some point. We just need to wait for ours and be patient and keep our self-confidence. They're so well coached. So we watched them a few times last night.
Sure. I get it. We should point out Elsa, Illinois. I'll admit, as an Illinois guy, even I had to look up Elsa.
Yes.
And I know Division III well. I still had to look it up. Can you give everybody a sense of where you guys are located and what the atmosphere on campus has been like since clinching the SLIAC?
We're right across the river from St. Louis, but we're 11 miles outside of Alton, Illinois. Elsa's a little village. It has all bread and breakfasts there. That's all it is. It's a little river town on the side. We don't have a gas station. We don't have anything like that.
I can relate.
No stoplight, just stop signs. Campus has been so supportive of us, and it's not a shocking thing, but it's so great for the women to experience that and to go through that, and just it's so much excitement. I've been stopped several times on the other side of campus. We had a little celebration at lunch yesterday for the women and the team. And we had most of our campus showed up. All of our administration showed up. So it's just been a great outpouring of love for them and support. And it's been a wonderful atmosphere here on campus.
That is awesome. You obviously have a big matchup in Whitewater ahead, but as we know in the NCAA tournament, anything is possible. Congratulations, Coach, on just an outstanding story. I am looking at the picture of the SLIAC celebration, and obviously there is a lot of excitement on that team. But I notice in the back corner, you are standing there just watching on. Could you give me a sense of what that moment was like? Because you're not in the celebration, you're not in the pick officially. You're back there just watching. What was going through your mind? What was that moment like?
Probably right before my mother passed years ago, she told me that I always made it about them and never about me. And so I always stand back and I really want to make the every moment about them. And none of this is about me. And I really want them to understand that and to get everything they deserve. Everything they deserve. They've worked so hard for this, and I'm not easy to play for or any of those things. I'm very demanding. So they have a lot. They deal with a lot, and they tag on a lot of tasks, and I demand that they are a very big part of the community and that they experience everything they can in this college experience, this D3 experience. So watching them celebrate and enjoy it and just have fun, that was the best thing. That was the best thing. I love winning, of course, like everyone else, but I love watching them experience. And
I get it.
How much they did.
It makes sense. I get it. Congrats. It's a wonderful perspective too, to push them to their greatness, and then sit back and watch them enjoy it. Hats off to you. Hats off to the program. Congratulations to everyone. It's funny because I'm literally looking at our D3 Hoops page, and at the top of the news releases is today's show. And for a lot of varying reasons we don't need to dive into, you don't have to go very far down. Say September 16, 2016, Principia suspends program. Congratulations. Great to see the team back. Great to see you all back. Great to see the championship. And good luck and have fun in the NCAAs. In the meantime, we always give the guests the final word, though. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with those tuned in?
Thank you for having us. We're very blessed for you to have us. We wouldn't be here without God's blessing and God's grace, and we're very appreciative of that. And I'm also super appreciative of these women on this team. And go Panthers!
Yeah, well, go Panthers indeed. I can't wait. I'm going to tune in to watch it. It's the wild card teams that I love the most. You just don't know what we're going to expect. You probably have Coach Carolla pulling her hair out a little bit.
I don't know about that. I don't have any left, so I would pull mine out last night.
You don't. She has. Coach Rowe, thank you. Take care of yourself. Look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Coach Ramiro Dominguez joining us here on the Hoopsville Hotline. Fun to chat with him. Up and down season, but man, it's on and up right now. They're on a 4-game winning streak, won 7 of their last 9. Whitewater, I wouldn't look over them too much. Panthers look pretty good. Fun story. When we come back, we'll talk about another fun story. Western New England men's basketball has been in the tournament since 2001. We'll talk to their head coach. And the other two coming up, Roanoke men's basketball and Mount St. Mary as well. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3 Hoops. So much more ahead on this matinee edition and brackets breakdown right here on Hoopsville.
For the love of the game. But for those of us who are Division III student athletes, it's more than that. A lot more.
Sure, the game is important. But as we work so hard to build both mind and body, it's more about team.
That is why NCAA Division III teamed up with Special Olympics. And in giving the gift of sport to those for whom it seemed an impossible dream, we are working to make this a better world.
Help us keep that dream alive.
You can make a difference.
We are the coaches of women's basketball. We are leaders and teachers, dreamers and winners. We are professionals who conduct ourselves ethically and with integrity. We place the education, safety, and well-being of the athletes we coach above all else and teach them the fundamental values they need to succeed in life. We are coaches united for the good of our game and those who play it. We are the WBCA.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
The National Association of Basketball Coaches is the nation's premier professional development and advocacy organization for basketball coaches at every level. The NABC strives to serve as the voice for coaches on national issues while advancing the core value of leadership, service, advocacy, education, and inclusion. To learn more about the NABC and to become a member, visit NABC.com and follow the NABC on social media at NABC 1927. That's NABC.com or NABC 1927 on social media.
Responsibility is being accountable for your words and actions, first and foremost. It also is an obligation to be a positive influence in the communities around you. Being in a D3 program, you're going to have lots of different opportunities. You're not just an athlete, you're also involved in student life. Your academics are extremely important. We give a lot of our student athletes responsibilities right from the start by giving them leadership opportunities, by having them engage in the community, be a positive influence. That's being a responsible person.
There are over 480,000 college athletes. Only 2% would go pro. That means over 470,000 will not get a shoe contract. No autographs. No private jets. No fan clubs. No Hall of Fame inductions. Instead, they will walk away with something much more valuable.
I did receive a non-athletic scholarship upon entering school.
I got the presidential scholarship, which was huge for me.
I think there's more opportunities for academic scholarships in Division III.
I did receive academic scholarships. Just being involved on campus, being a leader, all those things combined kind of get me recognized. It's a great experience for me.
Welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. As we continue to roll along, we're going to head up to Western New England. Kind of. If you know McDaniel College in Maryland, it used to be called Western Maryland. They're located in Westminster, Maryland. A lot of west to that, right? Except that Westminster, Maryland, if you look at a map, is just northwest of Baltimore by about 45 minutes, and not very much in Western Maryland. You got to go out to the mountains to do that, where Frostburg, a former Division III, is located. In other words, you got to get past Frederick, Hagerstown, Cumberland, etc., and you're in Western Maryland. Well, Western New England's located in Springfield, Massachusetts. That's central Massachusetts for a guy who went to school in northwestern Connecticut. I know where Western Mass is. I don't call Springfield Western, but it's west of Boston, so everything is considered west by that definition. Long story to basically tell you, the Golden Bears in men's basketball are back in the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2001, and they're not going west. They're going south. They will play Hamilton, who's coming southeast from upstate New York, and meet at Montclair to play in the NCAA tournament. But what's it mean for the Golden Bears to join their women's program in the tournament? And as I said again, for the men's team for the first time in 24 years. Colin Tabb joins us on the Hoopsville Hotline to talk all about it. He's the head coach of the Golden Bears. And Colin, I realize you are definitely not 24 years old, but I am curious if anybody, including yourself, has any recollection of the last time this team made the NCAA tournament. And I'm dating myself with that question.
That's a good question. And it's funny, I spent a lot of time on this campus when I was growing up. My uncle was the football coach. And I graduated from Trinity in 2002. And I remember when Western New England had some good years during the early 2000s. So yeah, there's a little bit of familiarity and recollection for me of those teams having some success back in the early 2000s. So
it's kind of weird because when I was doing some of this work, I'm like, Western New England's usually in the conversation. How is this the first time that we're talking about them in the NCAAs? And then I looked back and yes, 21-7 a couple of years ago, 14-4 in what was known as the Triple C, now the CNE. Last year, 19-8, 12-4 in conference. But you look pre-COVID and the team was a below 500 team for the most part. I think the women's team got so much attention, it just felt like we always talked about the men's team as well. You're coming out from underneath that women's shadow to some extent. They're in the tournament too, so I know there's a lot of excitement, but this had to have been a slow burn, as it were, to get this team to where you guys needed it to be and into the NCAA tourney.
Yeah, it has been a process for sure. And our women's program has been strong, and Coach Chazar does an excellent job. They have consistently been really, really good. And she's somebody that I consider a really close friend, somebody that I confide in quite a bit. And so very proud of her program and what she does year after year. But yeah, it's taken us some time for sure. It has not been it hasn't been something that has been an instant change when I took over in 2015. It was a slow process building it up and, building some respect and gaining some momentum. And, but it's interesting, like this group right now, we have a pretty heavy senior class. We have 6 guys that will be graduating or finishing up with eligibility because we have 2 fifth-year guys. And, so when you look at this group of 6 players, they've been with me for 40% and 50% of my time here. And they've had a lot of success. But this is the first time, obviously, we're making the NCAA tournament. And so excited for those guys, to achieve this. And, that was the vision when we were recruiting those guys 4 and 5 years ago. And to see some of that stuff to come to fruition right now is special for that group of guys.
Looking back, there were some hints, I think, that this season was coming together nicely, even in losses. And I know this isn't hindsight, but still, you start the season with a 1-point win over Springfield. You then lose by 6 to Brandeis. Those games are both on the road. You lose only by 5 to Keene State. You beat Worcester State and Penn State Altoona. But then you get a big win at the end of November against Ramapo by 5. You lose to Trinity by 3 around Thanksgiving. You got into conference play and started strong. You guys went, 8 straight, I think, in conference action before taking a loss, interestingly enough, back-to-back to Suffolk and Wentworth before then winning 9 of the last 10. Suffolk definitely had your number this year, but you avenged that in the conference title game. But you look at that pre-conference schedule, Coach, and again, maybe in the moment we all missed it too, but there are signs there that this team had something going.
Yeah, I think after we went through that stretch, and I actually talked to my players about it yesterday, quite a few people told me this is going to help you guys, down the stretch. It's going to those losses to Keene State and Trinity and Brandeis and beating Ramapo, that's going to help you guys down the stretch run. And at the time, I certainly wasn't thinking that way. I was hopeful that it could happen, and I certainly still believed in our group. But those losses stung because, against Keene State, I think we're up 6 points with about 5 minutes to go. Against Trinity, we had multiple chances to either tie it or cut into the gap to a 1-point game. So, we were right there with a lot of those games, and we just came up short. And but maybe it did help us. We certainly are battle tested. Certainly a group that is not afraid to play anybody, and there's quite a bit of experience there. So yeah, I like our chances. I think we can play with anybody. If things are clicking and things are going well, I feel really good about our group.
Half this conference was above 500 this season. It's been getting a lot of attention thanks to Nichols in years past, but they were a 13-13, 10-8 program this year. Endicott certainly has given this conference attention. They finished tied with you atop the conference at 15-3. They were 18-8 overall. You're 21-6. And Suffolk and Roger Williams were in that mix. What was it like in conference play this year? And, that's no knock to the rest, Wentworth, Gordon, New England, Hartford, and Curry. But that top 5, including yourselves, seemed pretty competitive.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head by saying, it's not a knock on some of those other teams because boy, we struggled and had battles with Gordon and Hartford and UNE and certain Curry on the road. Like all those teams, there was not a night where you could just show up and feel comfortable. Like every game was tough. But certainly the top 5 or 6 teams in the league there's a ton of parity. It's very, very competitive. And once you get deep in the league play, like we all know each other. We all know each other so well. We know what we're running. We know what the players' tendencies are. And, Kevin Betancourt does a tremendous job at Endicott. Roger Williams obviously won the conference last year. And they just play such a unique style that it's really tough to prepare for. But I can't say enough about what Jeff Duran has done at Suffolk. I mean, that is a very, very good team. We were extremely fortunate to come out of there with a win on Saturday. And they have a player in Keenan Robertson who is just an absolute killer out there. He is just such a tough matchup. So the top of our league and really everybody is just really, I give the league a lot of credit because it doesn't get a ton of attention and there's a lot of really good coaches in the league. It just shows that you got to really be ready to play every night. You got to be prepared and you got to show up.
You're a bit of an senior class or experience level led program. Tim Restal leads the team at 16 points a game, 7 boards per contest. You're getting Brian Geithner, who's on both of these are grad students, 13 points a game. But you kept 3 other guys in double figures in Palazzesi.
We have some tough names, yeah. Palazzesi. Yep.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
I'll help you on the next one. Vlakovic.
It is Vlakovic. Okay, I like that. Luka Vlakovic at 10.2 and Jake Harrison at 10.1. But the larger point being is almost all of them. Vlakovic is a junior, but most of these guys are upperclassmen. So it's kind of this balance between. It's awesome. You got all this experience, right? And they're playing well, but you lose them after this year. Do you feel like you got to? Mm-hmm. There's almost a take advantage of the opportunity while you have it moment.
Yeah, I think we stressed that a lot this year. I think we stressed the importance of making this year as good as it could possibly be because of what we currently have. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I think we certainly wanted to make this as special of a year as possible. I do think we got some good young players who have been competing hard in practice every day and just the minutes haven't shown up obviously in games, but there's some talent there for sure. Palazezi, Vlakovic, Matt Hood, Nate Casper. That's all junior class guys that that will have a ton of experience that will be coming back. But we'll, as it stands right now, what we have returning on paper, like we'll be a much different team. Like we're pretty big and physical right now, especially positionally big guys. We'll be a much different team and a different look next year based on who we have returning. So yeah, I think there's definitely some urgency to try to make this year as good as it can possibly be.
Again, you're going to be heading to Montclair. I assume, let's see, we're talking Tuesday. I assume, Wednesday? Or will you head down Thursday?
Thursday, yep.
Okay. You'll end up going down to a bit of a bandbox in Montclair. They got a great little facility, but it is tight. It's maybe a little smaller than your 2,000-seat facility there that you'll play. And you'll be taking on Hamilton out of the NESCAC with Utica on the other side, along with Montclair. What do you know about what you guys are going to experience, what you got for a matchup, and all the rest?
Yeah, I think the last 24 hours have been diving into Hamilton as much as I can, and in between figuring out hotels and travel and all that stuff. I've known Adam Stockwell for a long time. He does a really good job at Hamilton. Traditionally, they're very, very good in the NESCAC, and certainly some common opponents. But I can tell for sure that they have a very, very good player in Hank Morgan, another really good guard in Singh, and then a lot of size, 6'7", 6'8" across the board. A lot of these guys are playing significant minutes. So it's going to be a tough battle for us. No question about that. They bring a unique style of play from what I can tell so far. But they're going to be battle tested coming from the NESCAC. Every single game in that conference is tough and difficult, and they've obviously performed extremely well within the conference. So they're going to be a really, really good team and a tough matchup for us.
Back to what we were talking about at the beginning, your first time in the tournament since 2001. That was back-to-back appearances, and only the fourth time in ever that this program has made the NCAA tournament. Women are making their fourth appearance. They made it in 19, 20, 24. And now 25. So first time we've seen both programs in the tournament at the same time. What's the atmosphere been like on campus with everybody, and with the understanding that there's still ice hockey that could be having some fun too?
Right. Yeah. Actually, our wrestling team, our men's and women's wrestling programs have a send-off going today at 1:30. So, kudos to them and best of luck to them. And yeah, Saturday was a really, really special day because we had a doubleheader on campus. Both of us finished first in the conference in the regular season. So we were fortunate enough to make it to the championship game and both host. And it was a special day that I think all of our athletes and our student body in general is going to remember. The crowd was outstanding for both games, and they weren't just there. They were making an impact on the game. They were so into it, and it was really, really special for us to experience that, and for our guys, because we talked about it all the time, like the vision of our program and where we wanted this place to be. And we talked about having a packed house with standing room only as part of that vision. And we achieved that on Saturday. So, seeing that happen was really special. And it was definitely a great day to be a Golden Bear.
Diving into your history. Yes, you're a Trinity Bantam. You know the history there and why a chicken is a Bantam and why the Bantam's a mascot. NESCAC cracks me up. And you explained your history with Western New England. I did notice in your history that you used to be a basketball coach at Loomis Chaffee. And while as a Salisbury grad, I would like to absolutely rip you for that decision, poor choice is my initial instinct. I do know some individuals who went to Loomis Chaffee and were teachers, and so I can't knock it. It's a good choice, good school, but you kept that New England route, and I see it even in the roster. You've got these New England grads. You understand it from the Trinity perspective, the Western New England perspective of having been there, from being at Loomis Chaffee. You really understand the kind of the New England life, as it were, and it seems like you've tapped into it for your roster.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of talent here, and it's kind of an interesting dynamic in recruiting in New England because there's just so many schools. You wonder, like, do things get watered down? Are we all recruiting the same players? And, are they good enough? And, you kind of have some of those questions or thoughts. Are we better off recruiting out of region? And, I just think at the end of the day, the players are good enough in New England. There's a lot of talent in the Northeast. There's some major cities in Boston and Providence and, close to New York City, close to Albany, all that stuff. So from a recruiting standpoint, we're in a very, very good location because hour and a half to 2.5 hours from some major cities. So, but yeah, Connecticut is an interesting state to recruit from because you have a few state schools, right? And then after that, you have some very, very high academic schools in Wesleyan, Trinity, Conn College. And so, there's that kind of that next tier of we're not as strong academically as those schools, but we're not far off. So, and we're right over the state line. And I've grown up kind of being a little bit more immersed in Connecticut basketball than the Springfield area. So feel like I have a lot of good relationships in Connecticut, a lot of coaches that I know well, high school coaches, AAU coaches. So yeah, Connecticut has been a good recruiting net for us. And then the other unique thing is when I first started, I thought we would never really be able to tap into the Boston market, because you can go to Babson, Brandeis, and then as you head west of Boston, you can go to Clark, you can go to WPI. There's so many really good programs and good schools along the way. But this current senior class is probably the first class that we started to tap into that Eastern Massachusetts market, and then now it's been really good for us as well. So yeah, I think New England has enough players. At the end of the day, there's enough talent. There's enough really good basketball in New England. The prep school basketball scene helps that a lot. You get a lot of guys that come into New England and and get recruited from a lot of the New England schools. So yeah, New England's been good, and we'll probably continue to try to recruit in that area.
I skipped over the fact you were an assistant coach at Brandeis in Rhode Island as well. So Rhode Island College. So obviously, again, continuing that conversation of having that experience, and to your point about Boston, certainly part of that as well. And by the way, I did skip over the fact that after college you went and played pro, so you can give these guys a chance to understand how to go to Europe and play if they want to continue. So it's certainly a well-rounded resume, Colin, and I'm sorry it's taken us this long to get you on the show. But I appreciate your perspective, and congratulations to the Golden Bears on another tournament berth and the first time in forever. And good luck this weekend. It's wide open, in my opinion. Anything's possible. There's nothing predetermined. I look forward to seeing who comes out of that pod. In the meantime, before we let you go, we always give the guests the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those tuned in?
No, Dave, I really appreciate you having me on. I appreciate all the work that you and the rest of the D3Hoops.com crew does, and some of the other D3 guys that are out there. You make the community and the game way more connected, and give us a lot of avenues to follow. And you bring a lot of attention to the Division III game as well, which is a very high level of basketball, as you know. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate the good luck as well.
You bet. Again, safe travels. Mainly just getting out of Connecticut and through New Jersey down to Montclair. Enjoy the, I still call it the Tappan Zee Bridge. And we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Colin Tabb joining us here on the Hoopsville Hotline. Reminder, they're playing Hamilton at Montclair. That's a 3:15 tip. Remember, men's game's a little more staggered than the women. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll head down to where the women's championship will take place this year at Roanoke College at the Kreger Center. But we'll talk to Roanoke men's basketball when we come back. Clay Nunley and one of his star players will join us, in Marcus Morgan. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3 Hoops.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. It helped me to find my voice. and now everyone else is speechless.
Football has taught me a lot throughout my life. It's definitely had a huge imprint on who I am as a person. Competing at a Division III level created that opportunity for me to go to college. Not only was I the first one in my family to graduate college, but I was really the first one to even go. Being the first one, I'm breaking that cycle, and now that I've graduated, I'm not sure what's the next step, but I know I have a lot of doors open. And a lot of those are open because I played football and ran track here at Otterbein.
The National Association of Basketball Coaches is the nation's premier professional development and advocacy organization for basketball coaches at every level. The NABC strives to serve as the voice for coaches on national issues while advancing the core value of leadership, service, advocacy, education, and inclusion. To learn more about the NABC and to become a member, visit NABC.com and follow the NABC on social media at NABC 1927. That's NABC.com or NABC 1927 on social media.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
In any way that we can.
To get a friend home safe.
To never blame the victim.
It's on us.
To stand up.
To make our community safe for all.
It's on us.
It's on us to look out for each other at parties.
It's on us.
To be more than just a bystander.
To step up and say something.
It's on us, all of us.
To stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
If I lose, I'll respond with respect.
If I win, I'll back it up with humility.
If I fail, I'll rise up with honor. It's tough for us to put it all on the line.
Don't undo my hard work with poor sportsmanship.
Respect. It's the name of the game.
Coach of the Year, Administrator of the Year, All-America Team, Wade Trophy. The WBCA doesn't just honor coaches, but players, administrators, and much more. The WBCA strives to honor those who have contributed to the advancement of women's basketball. Celebrate the present, honor the past, look to the future.
Welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. From the Hoopsville studios, again, big shout out to Pat Coleman for filling in for us this weekend while I had to go out of town for meetings for my the job that pays most of the bills in this house. Or not most of the bills in this house. Most of the bills that I contribute to. The wife does most of the heavy lifting. Door's slightly open, if you noticed, in the studio because our mascot keeps coming and going, Tucker. So I just decided not to bother, but if you will have a jersey, by the way, you'd like to hang up on this studio, send it to me, contact me, whatever you need to do. We will make sure it gets up on the wall, including one that's on the wall right now. Roanoke men's basketball program's into the NCAA tournament for the first time since 2001. They have been knocking on this door for a couple of years. This has not been some newfangled thing in their destination, as it were. This has been something Clay Nunley's program has been itching and waiting to get to, I'd argue, since 2017-18. But it's the ODAC, right? It's one of the toughest conferences in all the land. It's tough to get out of that beast. And with a little change of the conference tournament, Clay Nunley's team almost clinched a title championship after getting to the title game. Joining us to talk about it is the aforementioned Clay Nunley, head coach of Roanoke, and his junior guard Marcus Morgan. And I did not promise I wouldn't tell Marcus some stories about Clay in college, but I will try and resist as best as possible. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave. Of course, thanks.
Clay, I know this has been something you've been working at for a while. You made an almost immediate impact taking over for Paige Moyer, who I know has been supportive as well. You just couldn't get that to break through. before this year, there had to have been a frustration.
I would say we were really, really proud of the teams we had and the work that those players did. And I think more just disappointed for them that they didn't get the opportunity to experience this, because there were some tremendous teams, Dave, and tremendous players. And so I shared with somebody yesterday, I was really happy for our current group, because our current group deserved this. But I was also reflecting back on the players that had been here the last 8 years prior, who really had some great seasons and a lot of success and just didn't get a chance to experience this. But they helped lay the groundwork for this as well. And so I was thinking about them.
Marcus, you come in you're a junior now. Last year, 16-10, the freshman year, 20-7. But when you came in post-COVID, you knew this program was trying to build in this direction, and you knew the conference you were entering. Heck, your coming out, your freshman year, Randolph-Macon was defending champs, I believe. Hampden-Sydney makes the Final Four last year. You knew what you were entering. What was it about Roanoke that intrigued you and you thought you all could get it done?
It was more of the culture here for me. I think Coach Nunley did a great job describing the culture on my visits, and then got me a chance to be inside the locker room with the guys and enjoy the experience. It was definitely the teammates that were here before me and now that are here with me. They definitely make it easy to adapt to the school and the whole process of basketball. And you really get to enjoy the basketball aspect when you have a great group of guys around you. So that's pretty much the reason why I chose the school that I went to.
Having known Clay, again, as we have joked and said it tongue-in-cheek, since his playing days as Goucher, we're technically classmates. I know who Clay is, and I know what he brings to the table, and I knew what he did at Randolph, and I've seen what he's done at Roanoke. I've seen his approach. Very much kind of that old school style of, this is Mr. So-and-so, and you shake hands, and you're respectful, and we're respectful to one another, and all of that. Marcus, admittedly, that's not true with all programs. Was there something about that ideal of all of us in it, we all do it the same way, et cetera, and we're respectful, that really intrigued you?
Yeah, that's kind of what our culture embodies, and we represent every single day. Basically, I mean, I even knew that when Coach, he came to all of my practices, all my preseason games for high school, postseason games. You know, he really does a great job recruiting in that aspect. And even as a team in general, when I first got on campus, the first thing all the players did was come and greet me, introduce themselves. And that's how we embody ourselves, is just a together program, and a program that is just about family. And that's what we continue to, grow and show.
Clay, again, I know that's part of your program, but how has that helped this program move forward and get into this NCAA tournament, maybe more on the micro level, but on the macro level, how has it helped turn this program where it's headed?
Well, I just think the thing that we really try to emphasize is recruit character-oriented student athletes. They're the ones that put the work in and deserve the credit. But I think in order to have success, you have to be able to manage adversity. You have to be able to sacrifice and be selfless. You have to be able to invest in something bigger than yourself. And so many of those things come down to, your character as a person. And the season is too long. Life is too short. We want to be around good people. And so that's always been a big emphasis from our standpoint as coaches in terms of what we try to identify when we recruit individuals. Obviously, they have to be of a certain talent component as a basketball player, but there needs to be a character piece as well. And so, the greatest compliment I can give our players is that when we got to know them and talk to others about them and watch them play, that character piece was a big part of what we evaluated, and those guys were tremendous in that regard, and they've proven that here. I mean, it's a fun group to coach, Dave. I mean, every day I come to practice, I'm reminded of how fortunate I am to be around these guys who really embody what is right about being a part of a team and being a part of college athletics.
This is no knock to anybody. Very different atmosphere than what you played in. You guys were very much a family, very much a team, but a very different perspective. So I love that juxtaposition from my perspective. To the season, though, it helps you get through it, right? When you have those tough moments along the way. Listen, you guys, if you really look at this, we're on the doorstep at 23-5. I can't believe I'm going to say this. You're on the doorstep of an even bigger season. A 2-point loss to Eastern in the starter. You lose to Hampton City at the beginning of the December part by 4 on your home floor. You lose to Randolph-Macon, your only bad loss, by 14 in January. You beat Hampden-Sydney coming back by 9. You had some tough battles with Ferrum, but you got past them in the conference tournament. You outlast Lynchburg in the semis, and the Guilford game just got away, Clay, in the title game of the ODAC, lose by 5. 23-5 could easily been 26-2.
Yeah, one of the things that I've told the team throughout the different points of the season is, to me, one of their trademarks this year has been their consistency. And that's been an everyday process. It's been how they practice. It's been how they prepare themselves mentally in terms of film and scouting sessions. And then obviously it's been in how they perform. And you have to be consistently good if you're going to have success in our league. I mean, every league is going to say that. Every league, every team probably feels like their league is really good, and they're not wrong to think that. But I mean, we live it every day in the ODAC. I mean, you're playing against teams that you just forget about what their record says. If you don't play extremely well, you're going to probably lose. And that's just the reality of it. We all know that, and we embrace that. We appreciate that, to be a part of a league that's that competitive. But if you don't know how to prepare yourself at a consistently high level each day, you're not going to have a lot of success. And I think that's been a credit to our team this year, that I think their consistency has been one of their greatest traits.
Marcus, from your perspective, what is it like to play in this conference, and what this season was like, knowing how close you were on so many of these games?
Yeah, like Coach Nelly says, it's a very tough conference to play in. We already knew that coming in, and through the season with the guys that we have, we already knew that the team that we have could possibly be the ones to win the ODAC championship this year. Like we said, we were just outside of a few games, but the consistency that we have, like the energy in the locker room, you can tell that the guys that we have, we love the game and we love the sport and we love each other. So, as long as you have that culture in the locker room, every day is easy for us.
I want Clay's opinion on this on his team in a bit, but Marcus, I want to get your insight. You got Joshua McClary leads his team, 17 points a game, 4 boards, top assist guy by a landslide over, unfortunately, you, Morgan. 139 to 91. You score 13 points a game. You're pulling down 6 boards a contest. You shoot 51% from the floor. You don't take a lot of threes. I'm sure you're working on your free throws. Jackson Bell's double figures at 12.1, Joshua Morse at 8.6, and Gavin O'Malley at 8. And I know I'm not mentioning anybody. Marcus, tell me a little bit about those guys and the rest of this team from your perspective, what it's like to play with them, what they bring to the table, what you see when you're out there as a guard.
I mean, as a guard, it's pretty easy. What we have in our culture and our team is a versatile team. Everybody can guard 1 through 4, 1 through 5. Everyone's built for the moment. The confidence is high in each guy. Everyone's embodying their role, like Gavin O'Malley stepping into playing the big man, playing inside. Josh Morse, he does everything on the court. And Josh McClary, like you said, 17 points, landslide over me in assists. Give the guys some credit. He's a really good passer, and playing with those guys, and Jackson Bell, even then, just playing with those guys just makes it easier for me to even play, because the scout is everywhere. It's not just specifically on one person. Everybody has a different part and piece that we bring to the game, so it's hard to scout us, which makes it easy for every single guy to get the stats that we do.
Clay, what's your perspective on the team?
I think Marcus said it well. I think it's a really versatile team, a very balanced team. I think this team has shown that it can be effective in a number of different ways. There's been games this year where we've had to win with different emphasis, and the guys have responded to those challenges. And I think one of the things that I would add about this team that's been really unique is, we about a week before the season, we lost our leading returning scorer from last year, Zach Rosenthal, to a shoulder injury. We lost him for the season. And I think when you have situations like that, sometimes your team can go one of two ways. But obviously there's a lot of questions that can pop up because you've got to try to answer how you fill that void now. And we've had several guys that have stepped into roles this year for us and played at a level that, I think our expectation for them was always high, but they've exceeded that expectation. And I would single out Jackson Bell. I would single out Patrick Clevenger. I would single out Gavin O'Malley in particular as three guys who we had high hopes for, but they have been, Jackson played 15 minutes total last year as a freshman. And really proud of just, some kids get discouraged when things don't come easy. He just continued to work. And then he steps into a big role for us this year and has really blossomed and developed confidence in what he can become as a player. He's scratching the surface of what his potential is. Patrick Clevenger is one of those guys who there's not a guy on our team that's in the gym any more than Pat. He is going to work his tail off to be as good as he can be. Whatever his ceiling is, he's going to get it because of how he works, and he deserves to be successful. And then Gavin's just a team guy. Whatever role you need from Gavin, he doesn't care whether he shoots once or shoots 10 times. It doesn't matter. Whatever you need, that's what he's going to do. But what we've seen from Gavin as the season has unfolded, he had a 27-point game against a conference opponent. He's had some high team. Hampton-Sydney, I think he had 16 and 9. We're not winning that game without him performing like that. So just guys who have really stepped into roles and exceeded some expectations for us that have been pleasant surprises.
Next up's Pfeiffer. While the game is at Christopher Newport, potentially on the other side, obviously Christopher Newport, both games have to go your way and Christopher Newport's way, but we'll start with Pfeiffer. What are you seeing in this, Clay? What are you seeing from them as an opponent? Probably a bit of an unknown.
Well, they're obviously playing extremely well. You look at their scores. They're winning by decisive margins here of late. In particular, they play a style that really puts a lot of pressure on you defensively. They're outstanding in transition. They can really they win a lot of one-on-one matchups. They drive the ball extremely well. They're an old team, a lot of juniors and seniors, really more seniors than juniors, and they've got some size at different spots that are really they can cause matchup problems. Defensively, they're going to disrupt you with their activity. They're going to pressure you. They're going to do some different things to try to get you out of rhythm. And obviously they've been very good at it this year. So you make it into the tournament, whoever you play is going to be a good team. But these guys certainly they're going to be a very formidable opponent.
The other side of that is John Jay, who is kind of the wild card story of the NCAA tournament, taking on CNU. Marcus, from your perspective, you're going to be getting on a bus. You're going to be heading to Newport News. You're going to be spending the night. You're going to be playing at the Freeman Center, hopefully for 2 games. The pomp and circumstance of the tournament, the excitement on campus, unless it's spring break, who knows? What is that all like from your perspective?
Well, first of all, it's glory to God that we made the tournament. Not a lot of people get the opportunity to even do that. I think it's 460 plus teams in the Division III, and we're one of the 64 teams that made it. So, not a lot of people get that opportunity, and it's a great feeling. We know that it's not just this is our destiny. We obviously want to do more and win the tournament. That's everyone's goal in this far. So we know it's not going to be easy. But we're excited. We're excited. We're glad for the opportunity, and we're going to take advantage of it.
Clay, there was a small part of me that hoped you guys would get matched up with Chatham. Just a small part.
Yeah, well, names from the past.
For those of you who want to deep dive, go deep dive on that. Guys, really appreciate the time. Congratulations. One of my favorite places to visit. I'll ask you this before I get to the final word from you all. This is where the women's championship will take place. Not the Civic Center where you all play the ODAC tournament, but your home court. Once again, it's been played there a few times. Marcus, what's it like to know you're playing at a site that is deemed by Division III to be where a national championship should be crowned as well?
It's an amazing feeling. It's also one of the reasons why why I committed. You don't really get the opportunity to play Division III basketball in an arena. Not a lot of people get the opportunity and that chance. So, it's a great feeling. I get to work the game So it's even better, get to be front row at the game, working with Pat Clevenger.
Unless you're busy, Marcus.
Yeah, unless I'm busy. Well, hopefully I'm busy. Hopefully I don't get a chance to work the game. But, it's a great feeling to even just have it on campus and have that atmosphere here, knowing that this is the place where everyone wants to play at. So,
Clay, he said it. It's one of my favorite places to visit. Granted, I've seen it a lot, but it is an amazing place. It's got to be your favorite recruiting tool.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. We're aware of that. And I think, the best thing we can do is make sure we remind ourselves each day just to appreciate what we have. And, not take it for granted because you work here or you play here and you see it every day. You're a part of it every day. It's an awesome facility to be able to experience your college basketball career or college coaching career in, for sure.
Well, gentlemen, again, thank you for your time. Congratulations, Clay, to you especially, because I know how hard you've been working. But Marcus, congrats that it's your group that broke through and made it back to the NCAA tournament. Good luck this weekend against Pfeiffer, then Andor, Christopher Newport, and John Jay. And as always, we give the guests the final word. Marcus, we'll start with you. We'll give you a chance. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who might be tuned in today?
Watch out for Roanoke.
Perfect. Yeah, I like that. Clay, your final thought.
Just, I think about guys like Marcus and his teammates, how hard they work to have great careers and be college athletes. So I just appreciate, Dave, the time that you put into showcasing them and their work and what they represent. So it makes their experience that much more memorable and it adds to it. And so appreciate the time that you take to shine a spotlight on all these different teams and their athletes.
Hey, Clay, thanks for your time. Marcus, thank you for your time. Thanks for the jersey as well, which is just hiding up in the corner of the production. We appreciate it. Good luck this weekend, as I mentioned. Look forward to chatting with you down the road. Take care and, enjoy it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dave.
Clay Nunley, Marcus Morgan joining us on the Hoopsville Hotline from Roanoke. Quick note, Pfeiffer played 4 other ODAC teams this year. They beat Averett by 10, they beat Lynchburg by 3, but they lost to Guilford by 13 and Hampton-Sydney by nearly 30, 29 to be exact. To just give you a reference on who they've got in the next round. When we come back, we'll switch to women's basketball, talk to a team who was on this program back in 2019. Last time they were on in the NCAA tournament, but a different coach this time, leading Mount St. Mary into the NCAA tournament. We'll talk to them. Coming up here on Hoopsville, presented by D3 Hoops.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Coach of the Year, Administrator of the Year, All-America Team, Wade Trophy. The WBCA doesn't just honor coaches, but players, administrators, and much more. The WBCA strives to honor those who have contributed to the advancement of women's basketball. Celebrate the present, honor the past, look to the future.
I believe sportsmanship is a mutual admiration and respect for your fellow competitors. We all go through a lot to reach the point where we compete against one another. It's important to realize that. So once we're finally on the field or on the court or on the starting block, we look at each other as fellow human beings and not just competitors. Being able to recognize the hard work that other athletes are putting in creates a more positive and inclusive environment.
Division III allows you to give yourself to other things.
Having that free time allows me to pursue the things that I want to pursue.
Division III athletics affords students the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport.
It allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
We are calling you, all of you, we are calling all Division III schools to join our cause.
It's on us to start the change. It's on us to be the change. It's on us. It's on Division III. It's on all of us to stop sexual assault.
Comprehensive learning is being able to adapt to experiences and apply the things that I learned. Being an athlete and juggling academics helped me grow as a person, and things that I've learned, I was able to apply it in another field, putting them into everyday life. Developing comprehensive learning helped me prioritize certain things to make sure I get to where I want to be.
For the love of the game. But for those of us who are Division III student athletes, it's more than that, a lot more.
Sure, the game is important, but as we work so hard to build both mind and body, it's more about team.
That is why NCAA Division III teamed up with Special Olympics, and in giving the gift of sport to those for whom it seemed an impossible dream, we are working to make this a better world.
Help us keep that dream alive.
You can make a difference.
Welcome back to Hoopsville as we get ready for the NCAA tournaments that start on Friday. Remember to head to d3hoops.com for all the links to scores and all the rest. We'll talk when we come back some of the other details about the tournament to keep in mind, some of the interesting dynamics at play. But we got one more guest to talk to, another guest who's in the NCAA tournament for the first time in a bit. Last time they made the NCAA tournament, if memory serves, it was pre-COVID, it was 2019, and their head coach was Michael Capolino, who turned that into a job out west and is now associate head coach at Navy because his wife is deputy athletics director at Johns Hopkins. Sometimes for Michael, it's not about his job, it's about his wife's, which I get. But for Mount St. Mary, there's no extra S in there, people. The Knights are breaking through the hard way this season. 17-10 on the season, but they had to deal with Merchant Marine and, to be honest, Mount St. Vincent a little too much, including Merchant Marine playing way too many overtime games. But they knocked off Merchant Marine in overtime in the conference title game to clinch a berth in the NCAA tournament and officially stole a bid from someone else who was looking for an at-large. So if you're looking at the first or second or third team who missed the tournament, Knights out there in Skyline Country in Newburgh, New York, are to blame for your misery. And the person to blame is Marion Dietz, who joins us on the Hoopsville Hotline. Sorry, Coach, had to set you up that way. Congratulations, first and foremost, 17-10. I want to talk about these three games with Merchant Marine because, to some degree, it was the story of the season. But first and foremost, you're in the NCAA tournament. There's nothing to scoff at there. You've got a heck of an opportunity just to be dancing here in March.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been a rough and a little bit bumpy of a year. But, we won the games at the right time. And this group is incredibly happy to just be here and be at this tournament at this point. So.
And we should point out, solid seasons since what we were talking about, making the tournament when they were undefeated in conference play at 18-0. The next year, 20-6, 18-2 in conference play, didn't play during COVID. Then 24-4, 19-1, 19-6, 15-3, 18-9, 17-3. This has been a competitive program. You're just in a conference, Coach, as you fully know, that doesn't traditionally get multiple bids to the NCAA tournament. A couple of things went your way. First, switching to NPI may have been helpful, at least for Merchant Marine, to put them in a position where they were a lock to get in. Second, you had a program like Merchant Marine along with yourselves that was playing very good basketball. You also had Manhattanville and Farmingdale State and St. Joseph's Long Island, who all had good seasons, all helped everybody's resume. And you were there in the thick of it. This became the perfect year to be in the skyline. Ironically, if Merchant Marine, nobody else wins, nobody else gets in, but you had the opportunity and took it.
Yeah, I think this year you kind of saw a lot of parity in our conference. Like the top 6 teams, the 6 teams that made the conference tournament, like on any given day, any of us could have beaten each other, did beat each other. There was a lot of split seasons. It was an incredibly, competitive conference schedule, which you saw every single week.
It's surprising Merchant Marine got through undefeated until conference tournament play, because 4-point win over, this is them, 4-point win over you against Mount Mary. I'm checking, there were a couple other close ones that jumped out. They also dominated some teams, don't get me wrong. Farmingdale State was an 8-point game earlier in the year, 13 again Mount St. Vincent, again in overtime, 3-point win over you guys. Coast Guard out of conference was close, but the point being is they got through the conference undefeated somehow. You guys in Manhattanville were sitting at 5 losses with Farmingdale at 6, St. Joseph's at 7. But let's go to these 3 games, because this was what I think was so fascinating. You play Merchant Marine on January 10th at their place. You lose 68-65 in overtime. And the tough part is it's part of 5 losses in 6 games. Yeah. Catholic, Mary Washington, Vassar, win over Mount St. Vincent, but lost to Merchant Marine and Manhattanville. That was a tough stretch. I want to start with that, because that's the second overtime game you had in that stretch. You lost to Vassar by 6. The Catholic game is 13. Mary Washington is 3. The only easy game is Mount St. Vincent, which you win by 23. You lose to Merchant Marine by 3. You lose by 3 to Manhattanville. That's a stretch that either is going to make or break a program, and it clearly seemed like it made yours.
Yeah, that stretch was brutal, to be like point blank. It was, we would get to 500 and then we would fall below 500. Like you just said, we lost to Merchant in overtime, lost to Vassar in overtime. We actually lost the next game at Manhattanville at the buzzer in regulation. Competed against Catholic and ran out of gas, and Mary Wash, we made it down to like the last 2 possessions. It was tough, and I, wasn't really sure how we were going to come out of it at that point. I knew we had the capability to kind of mentally push through it, and like see how the rest of the season would go, but it was a little shaky there for a little bit. It really did kind of make our team, and we had to learn a lot quickly from all those close games and try to turn it into positives moving forward for the rest of January.
You won 8 straight from that. Granted, some of it was your conference, the bottom of the conference, to help, because you got easy wins over Purchase and St. Lawrence and Old Westbury and Farmingdale State, where no one scored more than 39 points. None of your opponents scored more than 39 points. You beat Yeshiva as well, St. Joseph's, Brooklyn, and Purchase again. You did have an overtime game against St. Joseph's of Long Island. You won by 3. Then you saw Merchant Marine again. We'll get back to the Merchant Marine, but you at least got a chance to kind of, forgive me just traveling recently, get on the runway and take off.
Yeah, it was I kind of looked at it as like a chance to really build confidence again. I think we were a little shaky, especially when you lose that many close games in that stretch of time. You do start to wonder a little bit, like, if we do get in a close game again, is it going to be a mental block where we can't get over the idea that we can win a close game. And I think that Long Island game that you mentioned that we won in overtime, because we did that a lot this year. I think that for us was a mental lift that, like, hey, like, we can win a close game if we get there again. And that, I think that Long Island game was a huge boost for us.
But this last 5 was tough. You lost 2 in the last 5, 1 to Merchant Marine in overtime, 68-62, and 1 to Mount St. Vincent, which was a 19-point loss. But the second game against Merchant Marine, you play them at home, you go to overtime again. What is it about them that you seem to match up so well with, but how frustrating at the same time was it to now have a second loss in overtime?
Yeah, I think for us in Merchant this year, we did actually match up kind of size-wise with each other. And Merchant's always been a bigger team, just stronger team. Alexa's done a great job, obviously, this year with them. But we just matched up better with their personnel, and that gave us advantages. But at the same time, in the regular season, it was very frustrating to have opportunities to win, have opportunities to take the lead and kind of separate, and then just not quite get there. Losing that second overtime game, it was one of those things where you didn't want to lose it, but if you get a third chance, like the opportunity will definitely be there given the last two games.
Again, Manhattanville win, lost to Mount St. Vincent. You're going into the conference tournament, coming off of a bit of a stinger, losing by 19. And you're going to see Mount St. Vincent again, at least this time at your place than being on the road. But it's great to have that game fresh on your memory in terms of a scouting report. Losing by 19 is not great, I would think, because you got to get that out of their heads.
Yeah.
What was that turnaround like?
Yeah, well, there was definitely a lot of emotion going into that semifinal game. Neither game during the regular season against Mount St. Vincent was close. We kind of blew them out here, and then they blew us out at their place. And then on top of that, last year, Mount St. Vincent obviously made that incredible run within our own conference, and they beat us at our place in the semifinal game. So it was also a semifinal rematch from last year. So it was, trying to refocus ourselves to what we did well the first time we played them, and then also kind of separating the emotion of getting blown out, less than a week before, and, kind of remember what it was like to lose a semifinal game on your home court the year prior to that team, even though they were different. So we just spent a lot of time kind of focusing on what we could do better and what we do well, to try to take a lot of the emotion out of that game.
Then you go into the championship game and you got Merchant Marine. Again, yes, lost to them twice. Get a third bite at the apple. Goes to overtime. What part of the meeting before overtime was we've been here before?
I'm pretty sure I walked in and I said, well, third time's the charm. It's rare that you play 3 overtime games against the same opponent. That happened to also be our 5th overtime game of the season, minus the others that we had lost within a minute of the regulation. So, I think honestly, the confidence also came from the fact that we were down 6 points with 2 minutes left in regulation, and we erased that 6-point lead within a minute. So I think for us, that overtime break in between regulation and the start of it was like, hey, you've been here before, you've done it twice, now let's go seal the deal. You just erased a 6-point deficit, you can play with them. And you could just kind of tell by the look in everybody's eyes that they weren't going to let this game slip this time.
Let's talk about this team a little bit. You have Brianna Guglielmo, who is the Skyline Tournament champ in that game against Merchant Marine, scores 29 points. We'll try and show this later, but if you haven't seen it on social media, please go see Angelina Donato's shot against Mount St. Vincent. It is hard to describe, but shot clock expiring in the corner, falling out of bounds, maybe on a knee.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. Just a heave in the corner, goes, sure, nothing but net. Sports Center top 10 play number 2. Maggie, I'm going to get this right. Trinkus, it's not that hard, Dave. Certainly has been a huge impact on a team that's mainly senior driven. Number 1 scoring in the Skyline, surprisingly. But you don't have a score in the top 15 in the conference. That's the dynamic that is at play. None of that should add up, right? You shouldn't be the number 1 scoring offense if nobody's in the top 15, you would think. But then you have a player who puts up 29 against Merchant Marine. You got others who can hit shots. There's a lot of this you're like, but wait, huh? Tell me about these players.
Yeah, I have an incredibly unselfish group. We are top, I think we're 4th in the country right now in assists per game. We're in the top 5. But at the same time, it's incredibly deep. I have spent most of the year playing all 11 that have been active most of the year, pretty even minutes. at any point on any day, it could be somebody's game, and it makes it kind of hard to scout us. And, like you mentioned, like Brianna Guglielmo went off for 29 points and probably was the most important game of the season to this point. And I think it just kind of speaks to our depth and the way that this team is kind of molded together so unselfishly. They really work really well together, and it's awesome to like get to coach them and try so many different things.
Scranton's your opponent coming up. One of the top 4 in the NPI. One of the tougher places to play at home. It's not too far a trip, relatively speaking. It's, not down the road either, but what are you expecting from them? What are you expecting from the opportunity?
Yeah, so, it's kind of cool to go play, obviously, like a top 5 team, top 4 team. We actually did play Scranton last season in December of 23 here at Mount. So we're a little familiar with them. And, we're not the same team. They're not the same team, but they're good. They're one of the best teams in the country for a reason. They play incredibly hard. They're a great rebounding team. They have one of the best defenses in the country. So I think for us, like, we're going to go in and do what we do best, which is compete as hard as we can. And, I think for us, it's really about, I came in here 2 years ago and I said, we got to get back to the NCAA tournament at a consistent level. And this group has the opportunity to kind of start laying that groundwork. And, I think for us, it's about competing for as long as we can, as hard as we can, and just kind of enjoying the week, because you never know when this is going to come around again. Hopefully it happens more often, but winning is hard at the same time. Winning is hard.
No, that's everything in a nutshell. At least go and enjoy this experience. What's the atmosphere been like on campus?
It's been awesome. It's been a while since anyone here has really kind of gone to the tournament, and, might have been 3 years ago the last time somebody went from here. So, I'm not used to it either. When every email you get on Monday morning says congrats to the women's basketball team, it's kind of cool. The watch party was super well attended yesterday. It's been awesome. Like, it's been a lot of community support. Everybody's ready to go. Honestly, a lot of people are very excited that we're going to Scranton because it is kind of close to campus. Everybody's excited to go on Friday night. So it's been awesome. It's been an awesome support system.
Quick side note, you had a bachelor's degree in early childhood education with a concentration in math from SUNY New Paltz. Obviously not using too much of that, but maybe a little as head coach. You went on to get your master's down at Catholic. Not everybody makes great decisions, Coach. It's okay. Sorry, couldn't resist. But it's led you back here to Mount St. Mary, and nothing against them. I suspect, like Capilano, there's always the chance to move on. But what's your career and what's your path been like so far, from New Paltz to Catholic, Mount St. Mary with some AAU coaching thrown in there as well, and what's it all been like?
Yeah, it's been a little bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Obviously being at New Paltz when I was, like, we won a lot there. Going to Catholic even during COVID, like, was an awesome experience. We went to the NCAA tournament while I was there too. And, I left there and I was like, oh, I'm going to be an assistant somewhere for 5 years and then maybe a head coach. And that happened within a year. So, now I'm here and, very thankful that we're back in the NCAA tournament. But, it's honestly happened because of the support that I've been given and the trust that people have put in me, administratively, Jamie Seward, Matt Donahue, Lindsay Sharman at William Smith, like, they've all put this incredible amount of trust and belief in me that's allowed me to kind of blossom like this. And, when Colleen Ames left here 2 years ago to go to Cortland, like, she was one of the first people that I called and was like, are you sure I should apply for this? And she's been awesome in this whole process as well. So, a little bit of a whirlwind, but hopefully, we can continue some winning traditions here at Mount.
I kid about Catholic. Matt's great. Wonderful opportunity to learn while you're down there as well. And you got to know Scranton pretty well as well. So you certainly bring that edge to the table, which will make this a little bit more of a fascinating matchup. Coach, appreciate the time. I know you got to get on to other things, speaking of the tournament, and do other things. So I appreciate the time you've carved out for us. Appreciate your insight on things. We always give the coach, though, the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those tuned in?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to shout out my team and their parents. They're incredibly hardworking. They've given me I've learned a lot from them. I'm sure they've learned some stuff from me too. Incredibly hardworking. I have a great support system from them. We have a great administration here with Shane Bell leading the charge. And just I've had incredible support, and I wouldn't be here without any of them. And hopefully we can make some noise this weekend in this tournament.
Oh, that would be a heck of an amount of noise, but at this point, I don't count anything out, so I look forward to seeing how it may play out. Coach, thanks for your time. Take care of yourself. Look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Thank you.
Absolutely. That is Marion Dietz joining us here on the Hoopsville Hotline. I told you about the shot. I was able to cue it up, so let's take a peek at it. This was a shot that Donato hit in the semifinals. Oh, I got to hit play. That's right.
To go in the fourth quarter. Now for the Knights' final 5 minutes, you're up 11. Stay within your boundaries, but go for the jugular. An errant pass there. Good job. Keep it. Oh my goodness! Oh man!
Audio was a little overmodulated, but as they said, yeah, pretty darn good, impressive shot by Donato. That was a top 10 play on SportsCenter. Hey, we'll take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap things up, give you things to look at when we talk about the tournament coming up. Listen to Hoopsville, presented by D3 Hoops. Back with the finale when we get back.
For the love of the game. But for those of us who are Division III student athletes, it's more than that. A lot more.
Sure, the game is important, but as we work so hard to build both mind and body, it's more about team.
That is why NCAA Division III teamed up with Special Olympics, and in giving the gift of sport to those for whom it seemed an impossible dream, we are working to make this a better world.
Help us keep that dream alive.
You can make a difference.
We are the coaches of women's basketball. We are leaders and teachers, dreamers and winners. We are professionals who conduct ourselves ethically and with integrity. We place the education, safety, and well-being of the athletes we coach above all else and teach them the fundamental values they need to succeed in life. We are coaches united for the good of our game and those who play it. We are the WBCA.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's nearly 850 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over 2 decades. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're D3Hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com. The National Association of Basketball. Cut it off, get right back to it. I'm your host, Dave McHugh. Welcome back to the Hoopsville Studios as we wrap up this long edition of the Brackets Breakdown on a special Tuesday edition. So if you got last-minute questions, send them in. You can email us, hoopsville at d3sports.com. That's hoopsville at d3sports.com. I do have the email sitting right in front of me, so I'll be able to pay attention if anybody has any thoughts. You can also get us on our live stream on YouTube. Pat was listening to the interview with John Alisi, pointed out a couple of things. For example, even if you have St. Joe's and Redlands as 1 to 4 in a pod rather than 1 to 16 in a quadrant, you shouldn't have 2 number 2s playing each other. Whether you think of them as 2s and 7s, still doesn't track. I agree. I appreciated John coming on, but I think there were a few things that we couldn't break through on. I think they made some. I think the men's committee had some misses. I think they missed with the Trinity pod and the Tufts pod and where they sent Redlands. I feel like maybe this is an interesting perspective I'm stealing from somebody else, and it may have been Pat again. The 30,000-foot view is good, but to improve the 30,000-foot view, you got to take it from a closer view as well. You got to look at some of the more nuanced stuff and make sure what you're trying to accomplish not only looks good from afar, but looks good up close too. A lot of things look great from afar, and then you zoom in on a picture and it's fuzzy, right? I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. And listen, there's a bit of nitpicking. The Trinity pod just feels old school. Feels like the old, not all the way back to the old boys network, but back to where we were really locked in on geography and had a lot of limitations. Keene
and Clark playing each other that almost feels like they Clark surprised them by winning the NEWMAC, and they expected someone else to be there. And so suddenly they got to just plug Clark in. And I could be wrong, but that's just from seeing brackets for years and years. I hope the men's committee will receive a lot of feedback from coaches, the NABC, ourselves, the likes of Matt and Ryan and whomever else, and goes back a little bit to the drawing board to reassess how they bracketed this one. You can't change anything, but moving forward, you can learn from this and grow from it and hopefully make a better pot. I just feel like we could have had 2 or 3 changes, could have been a little bit better. Yeshiva to Tufts, I don't have a problem with necessarily, other than they're playing Tufts again. Maybe we should have sent Yeshiva somewhere else. They've been to York in previous NCAA. Actually, their first NCAA tournament, they were at York with York hosting. That's why I thought of it. I think it would have been interesting if they got sent to Franklin and Marshall and Lancaster country. I don't know. And NYU being at York versus maybe at Ramapo. Drew being at Ramapo it weirds me out a little bit. Drew is a top 16 who can't host due to other circumstances, and they get sent to Ramapo, who's just on the outside of the top 16. That does not feel like it's respecting Drew. Drew probably should have been sent to a York or an F&M. And in my opinion, Randolph-Macon should have, if you're keeping, here's how I would, a couple changes, and I'm stealing it from some guys, but also talking to some others and coming up with it. I would have sent NYU to York. No, not to York. I would have sent NYU to Ramapo. I would have sent Randolph-Macon to TCNJ. Would not have had an F&M host, or would F&M or York. One of them's hosting, one of them's not. Hampton-Sydney is home with a better pod than Randolph-Macon is on the road, is my point. I don't like NYU down at York necessarily. And I think Drew's, that's it. I would have sent Drew down to either York or F&M. That's what it was. I would have sent Drew down to York or F&M, depending on how you want to pod things. I would have sent Randolph-Macon to TCNJ. So I think that's F&M's pod, right? Sorry, I don't have the brackets right in front of me. I'll pull them up here in a minute. I would have sent NYU to Ramapo instead. And Yeshiva, well, now I guess you could go to TCNJ. You could have gone to Ramapo to be NYU's counterpart, but I don't like that, to be honest. Maybe you go down to York again, but in your Drew's counterpart. I don't know. Just some thoughts. Or you put them against... No. Leave them. Stay away from Randolph-Macon. We've done that before. Anyway, just some random thoughts. It's not perfect. I get that. And as you can see now, I'm already spitballing a little bit on where I would have sent things. But I just don't love the Trinity pod. I think it's boring. It's old school boring. I don't love the Tufts pod. I wish we had avoided the Yeshiva. I don't like where Redlands got placed. Playing St. Joe's doesn't make any sense to me. If you're going to send them East Coast, you could have sent St. Joe's to York. You could have sent Redlands to York. You could have sent Redlands to Ramapo. You could have sent Redlands to F&M. I just feel like they put something together and then couldn't get out of it. I don't know. Just random. I still think we're going to have a great tournament. And you can go to d3hoops.com for all your links. A reminder, all of the games are being streamed technically through Hudl, our partners, Hudl Blue Frame, with a partnership with the NCAA. They are free. They're not pay-per-view. But all of the games are going on Hudl. So if a school is a non-Hudl school, i.e. their flow, i.e. their stretch, or they go on YouTube, whatever, they have to send the link, the RTMP we call it in the business, the streaming encoded system goes to Hudl now, and then it shows up on the Hudl system. And, of course, that means you can watch it on Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, and Android TVs as well, along with the mobile app. We'll have all the links at d3hoops.com, including live stat links, Remember, the men's games are staggered. It starts with Yeshiva. Yeshiva was part of the reason we went to staggered. And then women are somewhat staggered. I'll be at Gettysburg for the women. Sounds like I will not be actually on air. I will be behind the scenes producing the product. There's a lot of reasons for that we don't need to go into on the air here. But I'll be there. I'll also be calling a lacrosse game while there. So looking forward to that. I get to see Tufts and Stevens and whoever the other opponent was, for blanking on. I think that's a few new programs for me to get to see them in person. Reminder, we'll be back here with Hoopsville on Monday to break it all. Or I'm sorry, we'll be on Hoopsville Thursday first. We haven't even booked our guests for Thursday, and it's around the corner on us. That'll be a Thursday evening show at 7 o'clock, followed by a Monday 7 o'clock evening show. That's how we'll get through all of that. And a reminder, women are going all the way to Salem to Roanoke College and the Krager Center. Men are going all the way to, Fort Wayne. Brain just fried. I saw an email come in that reminded me of something I wanted to bring up. Fort Wayne will be playing there at the arena once again. And then next year, reminder, next year is the Elite Eight Final Four in Fort Wayne before a joint championship in Indianapolis on the men's side. I just happened to see an email come through about all conference honorees. This is that time of year. All region nominations are going to be due. Look for information from D3 Hoops about all region. You must nominate to be an all region, and you have to be nominated, be an all region candidate to be an All-American. If you do not nominate, you can't get any of those awards. They require box scores being uploaded to the D3 Hoops system so that we have the data for those nominations. There are then votes by all region committees. It then gets to the All-America committee to choose the All-America teams. Again, you have to nominate. The deadline is, I believe, the end of the week based on regular season stats, but don't quote me on that. Contact Pat Coleman and Gordon Mann if you need to. If you do not know how to nominate for the All-Region and thus All-America teams, guys get left out often on these All-America teams and All-Region teams because they are not nominated. And with that, I think we're going to wrap her all up. Oh, quick reminder, replay is required for review in the NCAA tournament games. Some teams will be very simplistic with one camera. Some will have multiple looks at it to provide officials. Let's keep in mind and be respectful to the programs who are much more simpler, but providing replay. At least they're providing replay. That is not a bad thing. It may be different than somebody else's larger production. That is what it is. Some schools have been able to make that investment. Some have not. Schools are getting money to invest in their web streaming if they make the NCAA tournament and host. But admittedly, it's hard to spend that money at the last minute. That's the only flaw in this whole system. You get to host, you get a stipend for hosting to put towards digital streaming. Great. But it's hard to then get equipment and things you need with that money. You might be able to upgrade talent. You might be able to upgrade some other things. But if you need to upgrade cameras and equipment, that money needed to be spent several months ago and trained on and experience and all that. So keep that in mind. We will see replay. It may not be perfect. There may be opportunities the officials will not be able to see what they need to see on that replay, and the call isn't changed. And you can manipulate your video 6 ways to Sunday, but they couldn't do it on site. So just something to please keep in mind. Also, not to dwell on the Yeshiva story too much, but in case you are not familiar, Yeshiva plays the early game so that they are done and back in their hotel rooms and fed for the most part by sundown. Then they are done until sundown the next day, which means they cannot play until they can leave their hotel at sundown the following day, should they win. So that's why that game could end up being later in the evening. And with that, I also want to shout out the sports information directors who not only helped us on this show, they include Duncan and Kyle, and Colin. But also all the SIDs who are working their tails off in this crossover season. I noticed a blurb that I want to dive into for the management committee of Division III, talking about crossover season and the impact it's making on staff at schools. I'm fascinated where this is headed. It's not something for now, but I'm curious if they're looking at if crossover is too much. Does that mean you shrink seasons? There are some I think need to be shrunk. Does that mean you dictate starts of seasons where those start dates are a little bit less dictated? There's one in particular I'm getting done with starting earlier and earlier. Actually, 3. Do you change postseasons a little bit? Do you change end of season? I don't know, but I'm fascinated that the topic has been brought up at the management council level. And we'll see where it goes. We'll keep an eye on it and keep abreast of it. No major coaching changes in the meantime. By the way, you know what? We'll do this live. I still have not heard a bleep from anyone regarding Wentworth Tech men's basketball. Coaches are still listed on their website. Arlen Galloway as the head coach, Jason Finks as one of the assistants, Jerry McAuliffe as another, and Eli Harris as another. But they played a good chunk of the rest of the season with the women's coaching staff in charge of that program. I still have not heard anything from the school. Still have not heard anything from anybody else. We've heard rumor, but we don't know what's going on there. We never heard from Mitchell on their basketball player. We certainly hope he's okay. We never heard more about him either. Things we'll try and dive into when time allows. I want to thank everybody who came on the show, Bethany Danley and John Alisi, for their insight as the women's and men's chairs, respectfully. Clay Nunley and Marcus Morgan from Roanoke, Colin Tabb from Western New England, Ramiro Dominguez from Principia, Marion Dietz from Mount St. Mary, and of course Ryan Scott for that insight on the issue there is with mileage. We will again post that in our show page and send out a link about it as well. It is worth going into to try and understand that there is a problem that needs to be dealt with before it makes a bigger impact than it already has. And we'll see if we can get some traction on it. We'll see you back here Thursday at 7 o'clock from the Hoopsville studios as we get ready for the NCAA tournament. We'll talk to teams a little bit less travel-centric on Thursday's show and start looking at how we think those tournaments may turn out. You listen to Hoopsville, presented by D3 Hoops from the Hoopsville studios. Thanks to all of those who help support us. Thank you for tuning in. I certainly appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you on Thursday. You've been watching the Hoopsville, presented by D3 Hoops. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Gear up for what should be a wonderful NCAA tournaments.